Welcome to episode 5 of the Go Ivy or Go Free podcast. I have the great honor to have a guest with me, Joe Liemandt, who is the principal of Alpha School, which is a phenomenal school, probably one of the most innovative schools in the world. And I had the chance to visit them at their headquarters, the flagship in Austin, Texas. And I want to say the best review that I have ever seen for any product ever. And just to preface this, I'm a big believer that bad reviews from bad people are good reviews. And so, it was funny because, as luck would have it, as I was walking into Alpha School for the very first time, my wife and I ran into this guy who introduced himself as a VC tech guy who didn't want to be on camera, even though I was doing interviews, because he didn't want to upset his investors. And he did want to pull me aside and give me his opinion of Alpha School before I walked in, because he wanted to make sure I was properly framed for my experience. And his first comment, which was clearly going to be negative, right? Because the way that you operate that way, there's no way you're going to say anything nice about the place. He comes to me and he says, this school is very focused on success. And he just kind of let it hang there. And I stared at him. I'm like, and what did you want them to focus on exactly? He made a bunch of other ridiculous comments and we just walked away. But I gotta say, the biggest compliment I could ever have received from one of my haters would be, they're very focused on actually having the kids succeed. God willing that somebody says that about my program one day.
Absolutely.
I can't think of any better way to endorse it. And, God bless you guys for having something like that. So thank you first off for coming here, for being so generous with your time. And
well, thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell us a little bit about Alpha School, because I imagine some people listening to this probably have not heard of it before. So give me a short summary.
Sure. So Alpha School is a nationwide network of K through 12 private schools, high-end private schools, where we are working to reinvent what education is. Yeah. Right? That, we've all been in the same educational system for 100 years. And we have the opportunity going forward to reinvent it for the next 100. And so the core, our core principles, if we're going to put our kids, 12 years in the system, what should we do, right? Just ground up. If we were designing it, we all know what we went through.
Right.
But if you're ground up redesigning, what would you do? And so the core of it is kids must love school. So it's the core of everything we do. We survey the kids every 8 weeks. 93 to 97% of the kids say, I love school. Mm-hmm. We actually ask a second question, which is, would you rather go to school or go on vacation? And
it's a higher bar.
It's a higher bar. It's a hard one. I actually expected zero.
My high school was zero.
It was zero. It was zero when I grew up.
100%.
43% of the kids 2 weeks ago in the last survey were like, I would rather go to school than go on vacation. And that at the core is the most. We're going to have a lot of other stats we talk through with the best academic school in the country and all this other stuff. But that is the stat that no one believes. Right. But it's also the core of why our school works and why it's awesome. If you wake up and have a different perspective, which is, how do I build a school that kids love? Literally, they want to come in and say, I don't want to go on vacation. I want to go back to school, right? That's when if, as a parent, right? Mm-hmm. And I've had 2 kids at Alpha, 2 daughters. When you wake up and say, if I'm going to put my kid in a place for a dozen years, don't I want them to love it?
Yeah.
Right? And it's an easy question. You're like, well, I guess yes, except, we all grew up in a system where you're sort of supposed to hate school.
100%.
It's not supposed to be something you love. That's just not it. And that's just, we redesigned it the opposite and just said, how do we make sure that kids love it more than vacation? And that's our guiding principle. So that's the first thing. Mm-hmm. The second thing is kids should learn 10 times faster. So for 40 years, there have been papers written learning. There's a field called learning science, right? And this is the study of how kids learn and develop. And it's been around for decades. And literally, when I was in high school, there were papers, kids could learn 2, 5, 10 times faster. There's a famous Bloom's 2 Sigma paper about how everybody in America could be at the top 2% if they were given a mastery-based individualized tutor, right? So we've known this for decades. Now, there wasn't anything we could do about it. Now, with the advent of AI, you can sort of take learning science, you can take AI, and you can build a individualized tutor that will teach kids 10 times faster. So in our schools, you come in and the kids spend 2 hours on the apps. So we can talk about screen time, as one of the issues. We think there's good screen time, which...
Well, I'm going to go deeper than that. You want to know something funny? So, and I just want to pause you for a little bit, but we'll get back to the principles because those are really important. Jonathan Haidt had a post on X that went, baby viral, and he's kind of a mega influencer when it comes to education policy, which is a position of extreme responsibility, which, to be candid, and while I have a lot of respect for him, as a person and in a lot of other areas, and I want to just preface that because I like Jonathan Haidt.
No, he's great. I agree with him.
He is citing research that is completely garbage. Horvath, who published the paper that Jonathan Haidt was citing about the screen time being negative for students, and I'm going to say this because it's been validated at this point by quite a few people who are reviewing it. Cremu on Twitter actually did a really interesting analysis of this. I have a background in stats, so I went and actually pulled this code and pulled this data, and I independently validated this myself just because I don't trust anybody. Horvath actually fabricated the data there. So he deliberately, when I say fabricated, just want to be really clear about the accusation I'm making here. He deliberately excluded states that should have been included in his data. He excluded years for no reason in the data. He used data sources that were extremely hard to replicate, if not, not even the right data to do it, and then, made a very bold claim as a consequence of very, very bad scientific research. And that low standard of research now is being used and is being laundered, I think, through a system of other experts to inform educational policy. There's actually no evidence whatsoever that is real that would suggest that the educational software, even the bad educational software that we both hate, is actually harming the kids in any way. To our knowledge, whatever effects we're seeing are not because of the software in these schools. Their impact, as we would probably expect, is more negligible than not. So I wouldn't. I'm going to go even stronger than you on this. Not only is there good and bad screen time, which I'm sure we'd all agree on, the studies suggesting that the screen time is bad are completely garbage and should be rejected.
Parents are worried about screen time. They're worried about AI, and they should be.
100%.
They absolutely should be. So I want to make sure every parent's like, yes, you should. Like, back to we measure everything at our schools, and 90% of kids who are given ChatGPT use it to cheat.
Right.
And that a lot of the epidemic is now. You can use AI for good. You can use screens for good. You can use them for bad. It depends on the environment and all of that around it. And so, back to that concept of where we are is, we have a lot of families at Alpha who are like, I'm not a screen time family. But then after they spend the time to sit there and say, wow, okay, is it worth doing 2 hours of screen time where my kid learns 10 times more? Sort of choice A, or choice B is they sit in class for 6 hours and do homework. And most parents are like, I would rather the 2 hours and all the cool workshops that we'll talk about and all these things we do at Alpha 100%. Rather than just sit in class for 6. And so that's the delta of our second, which is we do now fundamentally have this capability where kids can learn 10 times faster. Shouldn't we use it in schools?
100%.
Shouldn't we use it in schools? And it's different than every other, system that's out there.
And it's not Khan Academy.
Yeah, it's not Khan Academy and those. Now, the principles of all of those, right?
They align.
But before AI, you couldn't scale it. You needed massive human oversight and things like that. But the new technology is coming. I think parents are going to wake up and be like, wow, kids could learn 10 times faster. Because in our experience, the group of families who actually agree and don't need much convincing is the homeschoolers. Lots of homeschoolers are like, yeah, my kids learn in a couple hours and then do the rest of the day stuff. So but anyway, at our school, and just talking about that, I guess. So kids come in, they spend 2 hours on the screen time. They spend the rest of the day doing all the workshops, cool workshops. But our schools are the best academic schools in the country. So every grade level, every subject, top 1%, right? We have, our freshmen, so we have a high school program, freshman average 1410. you know.
And just pause for reference. That's a top 1% SAT score in ninth grade, but top 1% for seniors.
And then our senior average this year is 1550.
Incredible.
And so, you know, we can teach, all our kids get fives on the APs. And they don't need to spend endless hours. That's always, as soon as you ever hear our great scores, everybody's like, oh my God, you must grind the kids to ever.
Right.
And we're like, well, it's 2 hours a day. Our average student literally spends 2 hours a day in these apps and gets to top 1%. And then, actually, I should say, at high school to get to the 1550, it's 3 hours a day.
Oh no!
So you gotta throw the third hour in there. But anyway, that's the second. So then, as soon as you've realized, wow, kids could learn 10 times faster, you're like, we should redesign the school day. Like
100%.
Every parent, right? I believe every parent in every society now has to say, given this ability to learn 10 times faster, and we don't want to have our kids sit in class all day because it's a waste of time, what should they do? Right. What is you know? Because I can tell you as a principal, the one thing parents don't like and don't want at all is after the 2 hours, you send them home, right? They're yours all day, like, you know? And so the question is, how do we use it, right? And so what our third commitment to all the kids is, we will teach you all the life skills that are so valuable, all the life skills that we as adults think are critical for the real world, right? Leadership and teamwork, storytelling and public speaking, socialization and relationship building, entrepreneurship, financial literacy, grit and hard work, right? So these, at our school, in the afternoons, you're in these great workshops led by adults and these big project-based things where these kids are just doing awesome stuff. We have fifth graders on their entrepreneurship program. They're like launching food trucks.
Yeah, that's sick.
Right.
I got to interview a bunch of these kids, by the way. I'm going to be dropping these on my social media. I was blown away by the students that I met. I got to interview, I think, at least 6 of them while I was there. And I mean, one of these kids is doing marketing for like major movies. I don't know if it's fair to mention exactly which ones just yet, but you tell me. But like, phenomenal stuff. I mean, some of these kids, one of them launched their own clothing brand. We had one of the kids was creating an emotional support app that operated through teddy bears. Like, I mean, the kind of stuff that you should know on an individual level. Parents hire me in my program to try to recreate and bootstrap this experience onto a traditional educational system. Yeah. But the thing I always struggle with so much is, where do they find the time in the day? These poor kids, like, because they're in school 6 to 8 hours a day. They have after-school activities. Then they're doing work that I'm helping them do, and their homework, and they barely sleep. These poor things. But if you can compress it, you have all that time left over. It turns an experience that is extremely stressful to create these kinds of really special experiences to they're just having fun. It's just a normal part of the day.
Well, and that's you hit on the key thing for us. The name of our product is Time Back. Right. The number one thing that we need to do as a parent, and when we talk about our educational system, is give kids their time back.
Right.
Like we've stolen it. Right. We've stolen their first 12 years.
Yeah.
Right. It is not. Nobody wakes up and is like, the first 12 years were the best 12 years of my life. Right. And we want to be able to make this. We have an opportunity now to make this the best time in history to be a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old. And the key of it is give kids their time back, because otherwise, as you described, they're overscheduled. They're doing too many things.
100%.
And the key is, they can learn 10 times faster, so you can take all that time and compress it.
And tell me, you guys assign homework?
So no homework. The third hour, sometimes kids, if they want to do the third hour, they can do it at home instead of school. But no, there's no homework needed, because it's only 2 or 3 hours, right? It's 2 hours a day for K through 8. And so there's no need for homework. One exception, if we allow kids who come in years behind academically.
Right.
And so to catch you up, you'll agree to do a third hour, usually at home, to catch up the work, so they can get to grade level.
That makes sense.
And when you talk, we have hundreds of people joining this school, right? We're expanding nationwide. It's going great. And these kids are transferring over from these high-end private schools, right? Schools, $40,000, $50,000, $75,000. And, they come into our school and they are behind grade level. straight A transcript kids are coming in behind. And so this concept of, what's happening to academics just sort of in general,
right.
We have a very different standard at our school. Now, the good news is because it's so fast, we can catch these kids up in no time.
Right.
So in August, I stood in front of all the parents. We had hundreds of kids who transfer from all these high-end private schools. And I'm like, well, there's two parts, and don't freak out about the first one. The first one is the average student who transferred in is 2.2 grade levels behind. Mm-hmm. And parents, don't worry. We will catch all those kids up. And so I just did the academic talk this week, and I was able to tell the parents every kid is going to be at or ahead of grade level by the end of the year. So literally just boom, you can catch them up. These kids, it's not hard when you can learn 10 times faster.
Yep.
But yes, that's a issue that's out in the world.
Well, and it's a issue that's, I think, being exacerbated recently because a lot of the private schools are rejecting any accountability metrics. They're telling kids, this is the crazy part. I've had to deal with this because I advise clients at most of the elite private schools in America. Yeah. And so they keep coming to me and telling me, hey, my high school actually banned AP classes. They're saying we're going to do our own curriculum now, where we're not teaching to the test, and they frame it as this virtue signal. And to me, I mean, my question was always, okay, well, but is there some kind of test, right? Is there some way for us to know, that you actually learned something at the end of the year? How are you going to prove that if you're not going to do some kind of test that would compare you to all the other people who are learning the same topic? Again, I'm not saying it has to be an AP, but it has to be some kind of standard so that we all know if you're above it, right? I mean, which for $75,000 a year, I'd hope you would be.
Yeah, I mean, that whole thing, we can talk about it. I mean, I find sort of the themes around these other high-end private schools, it's
bonkers.
It really is bonkers, which is, first off, through K through 8, we use NWEA MAP, right? And we publish our scores.
Right.
And, parents are like, oh, well, I wonder how my high-end private school's doing. How's my school doing? And they go ask their school for their results to compare to Alpha's. And the school's like, I'm not going to give you the scores.
Why would they submit to the test?
And so there's that whole thing of just the schools are trying to hide behind it.
100%.
And, a lot of times parents are very surprised where we get transfers is, the first time a kid takes an SAT test is a wake-up call for these parents because they're like,
always.
I've been paying, $50,000, $75,000 a year, 8-9 years, and all of a sudden my kid's SAT score, I'm like, he's been getting straight A's. Yep. That's the other part about this, the grade inflation.
Oh yeah,
these kids have straight A's. So if you come to Alpha and you have a straight A transcript, on average, the average kid is between 1 and 3 grade levels behind academically.
Oh yeah.
If you have B's, you are between 3 and 7 years behind because they don't give C's, D's, and F's anymore. So a teacher only has 2 grades to cover all the kids,
which
right?
Makes no sense.
I mean, it's just crazy town. And so we tell all our parents, we're not going to give grades. Don't trust anything we say. Mm-hmm. Use standardized tests. Yeah. We will show you where on a national ranking, what is your kid's percentile? What is their SAT score? Did they get a 5?
Yep.
Grades are manufactured and they become inflated.
Oh, yeah.
If I was a parent, you should look at the standardized test.
Oh, yeah.
And the second part is, probably 60% of Alpha parents, because standardized tests have gotten a bad rap, I think unfairly. But 60% of parents, when they come to Alpha, are like, I don't like standardized tests. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you'll like them here. And the reality is, because the parents don't believe me.
Oh, yeah.
When I say, look, your kid's going to learn in 2 hours, don't worry. They're like, show me the test scores. Right? And until they see those test scores goes up, they're highly skeptical, as they should be.
Yeah.
As they should be. But once they get the standardized tests, so even people are like, oh, I don't believe in standardized tests.
Yeah.
As soon as they get the test scores, they're like, okay, I believe it. Which is, everybody does realize it doesn't, standardized test scores, we tell parents, they're necessary but not sufficient.
Right.
They do. If you get a 5 on Calc BC, you know more than the kid who gets a 1. Mm-hmm. Right? And everybody knows that. Now, getting a 5 on Calc BC doesn't make you a better person than somebody else and all these other things, but it does say I know more calculus knowledge, and that's standardized tests say in their domain you do know or don't know the material.
And that's the part that gets me, by the way, about the private schools, because they are marketing a product that they just can't deliver on. They avoided the accountability metric. And then worst off, let me ask you this, because you were, before you did anything with Alpha, you were the CEO of a huge company, right? Very successful, and for obvious reasons. When you're giving feedback to your employee, would you ever give them a letter grade on any subject? Right. You wouldn't, right? Because what does feedback have to be for you to have any kind of positive result from it? It needs to be actionable. It needs to be specific. It needs to be bounded. It needs to be very precise, right? And you want to actually get the feedback. And this is, believe it or not, I actually learned this in relationship coaching for me and my wife, because we're doing some premarital stuff, right? I'm getting married this summer, and one of the things.
Congratulations.
Thank you. One of the things that, like, the advice I keep getting is, like, if you're going to ever give criticism to your spouse, you should make that the smallest possible critique that you could give, right? Because then when it's really bounded, it's easier for a person to say, oh, okay, you're not like rejecting me as a person. You just are saying this one narrow area is something that I can improve upon. Right. And so the result is that, okay, well, maybe they actually will improve upon it, which you'd want for the person you're married with, because you're stuck with them. Right? where for kids in school, we tell them, oh, you got a C in calculus. Well, what does that tell you?
Right.
Tells you nothing, right? But what's special is that if you have a very granular standardized test, and I want to hear a lot more about the way your ed tech works, my understanding, correct me if I'm off on this, is that you would never give a kid a grade like that. What you would do is actually, I imagine even on just a vectorized level within the software itself, you're actually mapping very, very, very specific sub-modules they're missing, and then just feeding it back to them so they could fix it.
Yeah, so exactly that, which is, when you take a test, we have post-test coaching.
Right.
Which is, you should think in athletics, at the end of a football game, right, you watch game film.
As you
and
should.
You say, you don't get a grade, oh, you were a C. You watch the game film and you're like, on this play, this is what you should have done differently.
Yeah.
Or, oh, on this play, you did well. Right? And it's specific to the work. Mm-hmm. So when you take a test at Alpha, the AI is like, these are the questions you missed.
Yes.
Let's go through them, right? Very specific. And it's going to say, now, it's going to ask you, did you know this material? Or were you being careless? Like, I knew the material, but, I made a careless mistake. Yeah. Or, no, I didn't know this material, and I have to go back and learn it.
Right.
Right? And so it's going to go through the questions that you missed, question by question, and then generate a lesson plan for you that literally says, okay, we're not going to focus on the ones that were careless because you already know that material, but the ones that you didn't know, let's go back and review that material. Right. So exactly this, which is you need to make it actionable and specific, right, where you do something with it, right?
Right.
All of our students see tests as, it helps me know what I know and what I don't know, because then I can go learn the stuff I don't know. Right? I mean, it's not this complicated thought, but like at most schools that they don't happen. You get a grade and there's nothing actionable about it.
100%.
Here it literally is, here's what you need to go learn to move up.
Yeah. And what I'd love to is that you can also find something to celebrate. This is something that I've had to learn to do because, one of the companies I have where we tutor kids for the SAT. Yeah. And when we're doing diagnostic tests, one of the things that I always have to coach my staff into doing is you will never, ever, ever review a diagnostic test with a student without spending at least the first quarter of the time you're there highlighting all the things they did right.
Yes.
And there's no chance that they didn't do something right. Yeah. And they need to feel that so that they don't feel like they're a total failure, right? Because that's the experience most people have at schools. And I think that's the problem they have. And, we should, I think, criticize the nature of the SAT to an extent, because I don't like, personally, like if I was designing a standardized test to evaluate kids for college, I would never have it have such a broad index. Like you have a math score. Yeah. Because that doesn't mean anything, right? Because what if you did really, really, really well on your algebra, and then poorly on your geometry, and then well on your trigonometry, and all these little subtopics? Yeah. And I would want to, it does have that score breakdown, but it's not the one that anybody uses, right?
Right. No, the strands under it, right?
100%, right? And so what you want is that kind of granular feedback, because then you have the motivation mechanism. Yes. Right. I know you guys do some special stuff with that, so I want to hear about that too.
Sure. Yeah. And when you talk about this, the core that kids at Alpha have, and that when you start using, our time back software and stuff, is kids always know I can do better on the test. I just need to put some time in.
Yes.
Right? It's just a time function. Right? There's this mystical thing of, oh, I can only get a score, oh, if I'm not the GT kid, I can't go. It's literally like, no, the software will tell you this is what you need to learn, and then you learn, your score will go up. And so, students who, when they're taking APs, they can literally sit there and say, ooh, I got a 3 on this AP, and I'm 23 hours away from getting a 5. And it's literally just a time function, right? And so literally in our app, we literally measure the amount of time it takes to get the scores.
I love it.
And so then kids, back to feeling empowered, right? They're literally like, oh, okay, it's just like, I need more practice. Right? And I do the practice and my score goes up, right?
100%.
And so, sorry, and what was the other?
Well, I was asking about motivation.
Oh, and motivation, yeah. So motivation the core of motivation, the number one motivation is give kids their time back. So if you try to take our software and put it in class for 6 hours a day and make kids who are doing the AP tracks and trying to do 12 APs, they're going to be miserable. I can't fix that. Instead, you have to say, no, these kids can learn 10 times faster, and in return, I'm going to give them their time back to do all the stuff they love, their passion projects and everything else. So that's the number one motivation. The other one is we have, our guides, because we don't need, the AP history teacher because the AI is teaching it. Our guides and coaches are experts in motivational and emotional support. And so their job is to sit here and say, how do I motivate the student? And so there's a whole range of them. So everything from what workshops you get, we have, privileges, as you do things. So we have a thing called Mobile Squad. And I'm talking, K through 8, where at the end of a session, you get to go, it's an off-campus, basically field trip.
Oh, that's awesome.
And kids totally want to go on Mobile Squad.
Of course.
And so, they have to hit their academic, minimums, or actually Mobile Squad is not minimums. You have to hit the academic goals, and then you get to go on Mobile Squad.
I love it.
And, and it depends on the age, and everybody knows, these kind of motivations. We have both standard ones and controversial ones. We'll talk about those. A kindergartner wants a sticker. Right.
It doesn't take much more than that.
It doesn't take much more than that. The high schooler, the sticker doesn't quite have the same effect. And so, but we do things, a lot of educating kids is that they have these built-in blocks about what they can do and what they can't do. Back to they can't do it. And they've, in our middle school, we have a real active program, which is there seems to be an epidemic of girls who come into middle school who are like, I'm not a math science girl. Like that's a thing, right? And it's just, back to learning science and, the science of how kids learn, there's 10,000 papers written on it.
Yeah.
And so we tell these middle schoolers, we're like, okay, well, go research all those papers and pull out the ones that show that middle school girls can't learn math and science, and, oh, wait, there are none.
Right.
And so the whole key is, for whatever reason, whether it's COVID or whatever happened, they had holes. And so they missed, fundamental building blocks.
Yeah.
And so they need to go back, right, and fill those blocks.
Yeah.
And then build from there.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you, the hardest thing to motivate somebody about is tell a seventh grader, you need to go do some 4th and 5th grade work, right? Because you're missing that work.
Yeah.
And, they obviously don't want to do that. No one wants to do that. Second, the only person who doesn't want it more is their parents.
100%.
Right? They're furious if they hear that. And so we've had to build a motivational system up to get kids around it.
How do you do that?
And we created a program called 100 for 100. And so literally we pay the kids, so we go to them and we're like, I'll give you $100 if you get 100 on this. We're in Texas, the Texas Star, or whatever your state test is, the Florida FAST. We'll give you a $100 bill when you get 100 on it. And they're like, Mr. Liemandt, that's impossible. There's no way I can get 100. And we're like, no. Any grade level. And they're like, I can take like a 3rd grade test and you'll give me $100. And you're like, yeah. And so they go take the test 3rd grade and get $100. Then they're like, can I do 4th grade? And you're like, sure can. Then they do 4th grade, give them another $100. They're like, how about 5th grade? And we're like, let's go. And they get an 85 or an 80. And you're like, oh, you don't know some of this 5th grade material. Do you want the AI to generate the lessons you missed? And then if you get those right, then you can get 100 and get the, and they're like, I can do that in less than a week. They do it, they get the $100 bill, then they're like 6th grade. And so you basically go backward. Right. And you have the kid motivated to go backward. Right. Where they're going to go back. And look, we're a high-end private school.
Right.
The few $100 that you have to do, right, to get kids to pull them up, is worth it.
It's a great investment. It costs less than tutors.
Costs us way less than tutors, and more importantly, getting kids to 100. Show them that it's not. Everybody's caught up. It's an IQ thing and GT and all that, and you're like, no. All the kids can do it if they just go learn the material. And in a time-based, teacher-based front of the classroom system, you can't do that. With a mastery-based AI tutor, everybody can. Yeah. So if you talk to people, who are applying to Alpha, and you say, can your kid get 100 on the Texas Star? Fewer than 10% of those parents say, yes, my kid could get 100 on the Texas Star. If you ask Alpha students, can you get 100 on the Texas Star? 95% say yes, because I have. Right. We have a building with a few hundred kids in Austin that gets more hundreds on the Texas Star than a school district of 100,000 kids.
That's incredible.
And so back to this thing, you can teach kids, look, this is just showing your knowledge. And if you don't know it, just go learn the material and you can do it. And then if you solve the motivation problem where they want it, right, then you can race through the material very quickly.
Yeah, and I want to just jump into that too, because one of the criticisms I think that Alpha receives is from people saying that this is all just selection effects. You just you have a high-end private school, you picked out a bunch of kids that were already very talented to begin with. So is it really that surprising that those kids can do that well on the exam? But I think you guys expanded a little bit, so I think you have some better answers to this next.
Sure.
Please.
Well, I do a couple. The first is, I believe every school has selection effects because people select to go to that school.
Hands down.
And so, yes. So when they say you have selection effects, I'm like, yes, we do. Now, compare us to every other high-end private school in the country.
Yes.
With the same one. Just compare us to that. Our kids, there's something on Twitter that, people can go download that I posted a month ago, which was we uploaded our scores and said, compare this to the most elite, highest-end private schools in the country, right? And compare Alpha on every dimension. And it's like Alpha's in its own dimension. Like, it's so much better than all these other schools in how much kids are learning.
Right.
And we're doing it in 2 hours, and they're spending 6 or 8 or how much homework they give. So not only are our academic scores higher, we're doing it in a fraction of the time.
Right.
And I'm like, so yes, we have selection effects, but compare me to, other high-end private schools, and we crush it. Right? Now, there's a different element, and to that point, if I was looking at Alpha and really trying to see if there's something here, I would look at that data and say, well, how do they do that?
Right.
And if you can't answer how we beat all the other high-end private schools,
then you would say it's just selection.
And if correct, and I'd say if you can't explain why we beat all the other high-end private schools, then you don't know why we work yet. Right. That's back to, if I was one of these educators who's out here, who I get the skepticism. The ed tech for 25 years is promises and it's going to work, right? The issue is there is different data now in the data set. And are you going to dismiss that data, or are you going to dive in and try to figure out why are they beating the other schools, 100%. The other high-end schools? Now, there's another data set that we're going to be bringing online, and I think this is the other one, which is we have thousands of kids, right? We have a different school that uses the same 2-hour Alpha time-back software. It's called Texas Sports Academy. This is a dramatically cheaper school. This tuition at this school ranges, it's got different locations, but from $10,000 to $25,000.
Yep.
And at $10,000, that makes them eligible for the Texas vouchers. Vouchers will be free for thousands of kids throughout Texas, and they will get the Alpha academics. We've been running about a dozen of these schools since August, right? And our academic results at those schools they're learning twice as much in 2 hours a day, the same as if you're at a high-end private school.
Yeah.
And we're going to make that available broadly to everybody who has access to a voucher.
And let's dive into that just real quick. So what is the academic background of the students at Texas Sports Academy in particular? So we established that it's definitely not the same kind of high-end private school, but were these kids, the academic all-stars, or the people who are doing sports?
Yeah. So these are people who are D1 aspirational athletes, right? They're half of them are the bottom 40% academically. So you have a lot of kids in the bottom 25%, right? Bottom half academically. There are some that are higher than that, but when you look at that demographic, right, people are going to say, okay, that is more reflective of what your average school is going to be.
Right.
Now, once again, they do select though, which is they are selecting I love sports.
Yes.
Right. And when you say I have to build a school that they love more than vacation, you do have, I have to build a school. If you say, what would you love? And they're like, I want to play sports. We're like, great. Well, we're going to make sure your afternoon is playing sports, right? And we hire, famous ex-players and coaches and ex-Olympians, right? And, those students are motivated. So, if you can go online and watch the testimonial videos,
right,
and these kids will say, look, I used to skip school all the time. I totally never wanted to go to school. And, but now I'm never late. And I crush through my 2 hours so I get to go practice, and whether it's my baseball or my basketball or whatever it is. But they're totally motivated to do that. But academically, and if you want to know why our tutor works with them, if you're a middle schooler and you're bottom, 15, 20% in this country, you basically can't read, right? That if you are given, 8th grade material, if your age grade is 8th grade and you're given 8th grade material, right, and you're bottom 25%, you can't read it. It's the equivalent of giving me an MCAT.
Yeah.
I don't know the words on the page. I'm like, you can tell me you have grit or growth mindset. You can tell me whatever. I'm not going to learn it because I don't know the words.
Yeah.
You have to roll me back to like freshman bio, right? And then build me up.
Right.
And this is why AI tutors are so great, right? Because an 8th grade teacher has to teach 8th grade material. What happens is, our time back software is going to give them 2nd grade phonics, 3rd grade phonics, multiplication, 3rd and 4th grade multiplication division tables, right? Because that's where they have to build up. And then the magic is they can catch up quickly when you're doing that, right? And that's the whole thing of where you're learning 10 times faster. Yeah. So these kids are learning faster, right, than almost any other school in the country, even though they're starting from a low base.
Right.
And so this whole concept of educational stuff is if you keep doing a time-based system, right, you just have kids who are, where you're not serving them because they've fallen behind, and so they're just left behind.
Right.
And with our system goes back and meets them where they are.
Right, because they don't feel like failures. And that's the part that I think people underestimate, because this has been a known result in psychology for a very long time. Are you familiar with Jaak Panksepp?
No.
So he did a lot of these phenomenally interesting studies on rats. And one of the studies that they did was observing young male rats that would wrestle with each other. And rats are very playful, in fact. So like lab rats, they will wrestle with each other. And much like with humans wrestling, if you have even a small size difference in wrestling, the larger rat wins pretty much every time, right? What they observed, that we know this works socially, which is really interesting, is that when the rats would wrestle and you have 2 rats of different size, they would still wrestle together, right? But 2 things needed to happen. The small rat, rather, always had to invite the larger rat to wrestle. And the larger rat had to let the small rat win at least 30% of the time. Okay. And if it wasn't at least 30% of the time the small rat was winning, it just wouldn't play anymore. It would take its ball and go home.
Right.
And what I think the time-based school system is doing, like our traditional school system does, especially to a student who's an athlete, right, who's spending so much extra time on the athletics that inevitably it's going to make it harder to excel the same way academically, even if you have the faculties.
Correct.
Right? Because I think people are multifaceted, right? You can have, just because you're great at a sport doesn't mean that you're not intelligent. Correct. It just means that you're certainly allocating your time differently, and that's going to have different results on your outcomes. But those are kids who are being treated like that little rat, except the big rat in school is never letting them win.
Correct.
And so they're going to take their ball and
that's a great point. So this is an important thing back to when you talk about testing and achievement, which is, what we publish is growth.
Right.
which is how much you're growing, which is independent of your starting point.
Exactly.
So if you take a kid, right back to your bigger rat, okay, I have the top 1 percentile kid,
right,
and I have the bottom 25 percentile kid. If you show them that ranking on a consistent basis, this guy's always going to lose. Even if he's moving up, right? That's a long journey.
100%.
Right? But if instead you no, do the growth rate. How much did you learn today? How much did you learn this week? Right? Because we measure it. We have a system of how much you learn. Then it's a fair fight. Right? Because then it's just so our sports academy kids, during we had a snow days in Texas, and the coach, and back to coaches being great motivators,
right?
The coach sent out a note to his team, right? And he's like, look, guys, we can't do athletics, because you're all stuck at home, but, we have a culture of excellence and the minimums are never accepted. We know that at our sports academy. And so, we're not going to do the 2-hour minimum today. Since it's a snow day, we do the rest of the day, 3-hour minimum. And you know what, kids? Strive to see if you can do 200 XP, right? 200 learning minutes. And send it out to the parents and the kids, and everybody's like, yeah, coach, we're going to go crush it, right? And so those kids for the week did 200 XP a day, right?
I love it.
Your high-end private schools are doing about 120, right? And those kids learned way more in the day, and they won all the leaderboards, right? And so you do absolutely, to your point, when you're setting up these motivations, you have to set them up that they're geared for what the kids like.
Exactly.
And if you make it where they're never going to win, they're not going to want to be on that leaderboard. Right. But kids, and generally we find about 25-30% of kids are naturally competitive. Every kid doesn't actually even want to be on the leaderboard. 25 to 30% are like, put me on that leaderboard. Right. I'm going to win. I'm going to race it. You hear stories.
Oh, I was like that.
Yeah.
I was obnoxiously like that, and I loved it. But, but those kids, let them go fight amongst themselves.
And the other 70% are going to do others. My oldest daughter never cared about winning a leaderboard. Right. And she was just completion oriented. Right. My younger daughter was like, oh, I got to max out the leaderboard. I better win. And it just different personality types. Yeah. And that's our whole system. There's not one motivational system.
No, of course not.
You need all these different ones. Sometimes it's competition. Sometimes it's just, I want to do this by myself. I want to have completion and excellence. And once I get there, I'm good. Some is team. Like, there's a lot of kids who are like, I don't really individually care about this, but I'll never let my team down. And I'll never let my team down. And you leave that. And so team-based things where they're going to make sure that, they don't let their team down. So all these different dynamics about motivation. But the core of it at the end of it is, and, one of the things we're criticized about is we use extrinsic motivation. And, at the end of the day, you need intrinsic motivation. And part of what we do that people disagree with, but we obviously think is really great, is we think that if you use extrinsic motivation to remove the blockers that kids have, it's totally worth it. Back to this, when you catch them up and they're getting hundreds on the Texas Star, that's extrinsic motivation.
Right.
But let me tell you, after those kids go through that, they see themselves differently.
Yes.
They're no longer, right, oh, I'm not a math science girl. They're like, oh my God, I guess I'm a math science girl. I'm top 1%, right? And however much money you had to spend to get there, right, the $100 bills, it was totally worth it because now your kid sees themselves differently, which is intrinsic.
Yes.
Right? And that, back to, there's also a lot of psychology of, kids don't want to do things they're not good at. It's why in Texas they all hold the kids back so they're bigger, just exactly like a rat. For sports, right? They want to hold them back. It's the same thing as how do you, jumpstart your kid, right? If they've fallen behind, however, in the standard school system, we're like, we just need to jumpstart them in so they know they can crush their academics, right? We talk about you can crush academics in 2 hours a day. And our students all believe like, yes, I can. And that's what you need to get kids to do it because then once they believe it, then they think things like, well, I can get any score I want. I just have to put time in. And once you have those kind of things, you do have a growth mindset. There is no limits that you have. And whatever extrinsic motivation you had to do to get them there is all set.
Well, and the extrinsic part, I think, is much more powerful than people ever give it credit for. And believe it or not, there's actually a lot of great psychology to back this up. Not even going to focus on money for a second, but did you know that you can make yourself happy by smiling?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a real thing. You can make yourself happy by smiling. You can make yourself sad by listening to sad music. You can prime yourself for just about anything, right? Extrinsically. And we know this, and we all, intuitively accept this in every other aspect of life.
Right.
But we say that a kid should naturally want to do physics. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So in every other aspect of life, we all just intuitively accept that, whatever is on the outside becomes on the inside. Yeah. And, this is, I don't know if you've ever explored hypnosis. This is something that I learned about deeply, in part from reading a lot of really amazing books by the late, great Scott Adams. And he, described a lot of really interesting effects with this, where you could, change your identity on the outside first, right, by replacing a lot of things in your environment, and then that then works inward. Like if you, for example, if you're feeling very stressed, like believe it or not, cleaning your room is a really great way to de-stress yourself, because the environment around you is a reflection of what's going on in your head. And so we would change these things, and then the fact that a kid would then change their identity as a consequence of that, well, it should be kind of obvious if you think about it. Right. So it's beautiful.
No, and that is. And so, we believe that, if you look at the students, right, that we have, there were we have three girls who were, their parents in 8th grade would have said they're arts theater girls, can't do math, science, all of this. And they went through the program, right? They were paid extrinsically to get up to top 1%. Right. But they changed their view of themselves. Now, all three of those girls now got 790 on their math SAT.
Incredible.
Right. And they didn't actually have to need any extrinsic motivation to get the 790, because once they were there in middle school, they're like, oh, I guess I can do this. Right. And they did it. Now, and so those kind of things are, when we look at it, you're trying to untap kids' potential. Yeah. You're trying to figure out how you get them there. Right. But once you take these blockers away, that's the biggest thing that, we see as a school as the most important thing for a school to do.
Yeah, and I see that as an even bigger advantage. And I want to dive into the whole dynamic there between educating boys and girls. Sure. Because I have some controversial opinions on this.
All right.
And just to be clear, this is informed by me working with hundreds of really, really, really high achieving kids. So I'm not just pulling this out of nowhere. Yeah. But the way that we educate boys and girls, and of course there's individual exceptions to this, but as a group, it needs to be very different. And it's funny, actually, a lot of people don't know this, but when I was in college, I worked on a project called Forgotten Women in Science. So I was a physics major. I was really deep into physics research. And one of my best friends, Catherine, was also in the same physics classes as me. And one of the things we ran into was, this apparent lack of recognition, certainly for a lot of women scientists, historically speaking. And we ended up studying what was going on with girls who tried to get into this pipeline. Yeah. And it's a lot of what you said. At young ages, there's no difference between the performance of girls and boys when it comes to these fields. And as you approach high school, they start to diverge, right? And I have a pet theory that I haven't validated. So this part does not have a lot of evidence behind it. But my suspicion is that women and men have, generally speaking, different motivational systems. And part of it, I think, has to do with how agreeable you are. If you're a man and you're kind of like me, I imagine you're probably a little bit like this too. If you're, a lot of guys can be hyper competitive guys. Like, I love winning. I will go fight and win. And I played sports when I was in high school. And my favorite part, it wasn't just winning, it was making sure someone else lose. Like, someone else had to lose for me to win. And that's okay. In sports, we accept that because that's part of the motivational structure. That works very well for young boys. And I feel like in a lot of ways, boys are failing in schools because we've removed that from them. We're removing that competition, that feeling of winning from them. But at the same time, with the girls, especially when it comes to STEM subjects, what's the way that you find out that you're good at STEM? Yeah, it's from competitions, right? It's from all these structures that, for women, generally speaking, they actually would perform better in a much more collaborative environment. Like you mentioned with your daughter before, she doesn't really care where she is in the ranking. It's not about that for her. She might be much more motivated. You tell me if this is true. By being in a group of other people that she sees succeeding with her, and maybe she's exploring a topic and building some special new project, and then she can achieve marvelous things. Correct. Right. But you have to motivate her the way she actually needs to be motivated.
No, absolutely.
And then the gap goes away.
No. no, 100%. That, she's a math major now at Stanford, my oldest daughter.
Right.
Math, English, double major. And, when she talks about math,
right.
She's like, oh, my dorm mates and I, my study group.
Right.
And they're all, it's 100% collaborative.
Right.
Right. And, when I was at Stanford, right, everybody's like, I'm just doing this myself. All the guys, all my friends were just like, well, I'm just going to do it myself because it's way faster than being in a group and all this
right.
stuff. Why would I want to be slowed down? And do very different ways to your point.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, people get motivated different ways, and the nice thing about your approach, I think, is that it individualizes it to the point where you can match the system to the student.
Yes.
Right, and you don't have to switch schools entirely just to get your kid a motivational system that would be appropriate for them, which makes sense.
No, and one thing about our academic side that we talk about is when we believe we have a theory of academics that's very different than every other school in the world, which is, we believe that if a student isn't learning, it's our fault, right? It's the system's fault, not the student's, right? There's this whole view of, okay, blame the student, whatever reason it is. Mm-hmm. We believe, no, we're accountable for it, right? And so we take a systemic view of it, and we're like, why isn't this student learning, right? And it can be, oh, they don't have a motivation. And so their guide's going to be like, okay, how do we motivate you, right? Is it they're in lessons that are too easy, too hard? Is that the issue? Is the lesson itself not teaching well? Like, what's the problem? We measure all of this, right? But we are accountable for it. And that's why we build a system that delivers such crazy things, is because the system, it's our job, right? That is our job. We're like parents. This is our job to do.
Right.
Like if, I know a lot of high-end private schools, they like have after-school tutors and all that kind of stuff, a big part of your business probably. 100%. My job is to like eliminate your business because I'm like, isn't it the job like in a couple hours a day in the classroom that we just educate the kids so they don't need to they don't need to go to school after school, which is sort of, crazy to me.
Well, and I pray that you do, right? I can't tell you, because that's the part of my business that just is nonsense to me. And I think it's the byproduct of a system that has become largely monopolistic, right? And people don't think about this, right? Because you think, oh, it's a private school. Private schools ought to be competitive with each other. Not actually, and not in practice, right? When you have way, way, way more demand than you ever have supply, and they have no interest in ever increasing their class sizes, which, if you're a parent, for example, in New York City or the Bay Area, you're listening to this right now, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The schools are already charging whatever $70,000, $100,000 a year, and they will charge that, and they will be full every single year. Some of these schools, I had students messaging me on my Instagram the other day, telling me, "Oh my God, private school day is here," and I'm like, it sounds like Ivy Day, right? It literally sounds like Ivy Day, but you're talking about a freaking high school, okay? Which is like, you're telling me nobody decided to just make enough of these schools to just, I don't know, eat up the competition? Like, what's holding them back? And, these schools themselves too, right? What motivation they have to improve? What you talked about before, about, okay, well, it's our fault if the outcome is not achieved. Well, that's a standard product development cycle at every other company on Earth that actually has to make a product that works, right?
Exactly. 100%.
Are you going to blame your customer?
No, exactly. Coming, I'm new to education. I became a principal 4 years ago, but I'm like, literally, oh my God, they're blaming the customers. This is crazy town, right? And so,
it doesn't make any sense, right?
And the second one about your capacity, I mean, Alpha's growing like crazy, right? The reason we have all the hype, and because we walk into these cities, and there's these schools are like, we have a decade-long wait list, of all these people who want in. And
you didn't think to open a second campus?
Yeah, I'm just like, really? Oh, okay, well, we'll open a campus. Why don't you come to ours? I mean, it's just, it's this crazy concept of, that they're trying to sell elitism,
right,
as opposed to education, right? And we're like, no, we're going to take kids, we're going to educate them, we're going to develop them. Right, that's our job.
And it's a different business
model. School, right? And so that's why and I think how much our kids develop, right? That's part of like this whole reinventing school. You can really look at the school day and be like, oh my gosh, these kids can spend their days doing not just wasting their time sitting in class.
Right.
They get to do all these crazy things, which is why we get all the why everybody's moving over to schools is because the parents are like 85% of alpha parents say, I saw my kid do something in the last, because we do it every 10 weeks.
Right.
I saw 85% say, I saw my kid do something that I thought was impossible for their age. Which is, we're sitting there and we're saying, guys, if you develop these kids, they can do amazing things.
Right.
Like just phenomenal things, like when you visit the campus. Every parent's the same way. They hear all these stories about Alpha and, oh my God, and AI's bad. And there's all these like, it's a school of robot terminators, or there's a lot of weird images about what our school is. But, they go visit the school, right? Or they talk to parents who have their kids in it, or they, most importantly, just meet the kids.
Right.
And they're just like, this is phenomenal. I didn't know that 8-year-olds could do this. I didn't know 12-year-olds or 16-year-olds,
right,
can do all these things. The fifth graders are launching a food truck, right? Our middle schoolers flew over to Poland, right, to teach 1,000 Ukrainian refugees how to use this because they didn't have schools or teachers. So we're like, our middle school parents were like, I didn't think my kid could learn Ukrainian. I didn't think he'd know how to go fundraise to actually raise the money to go over there. I didn't know that he'd want to go, spend a week helping all these other kids, right? And just those kind of things, all kids are awesome, right? They have huge potential. And the system we have is just, right, capping them out. Mm-hmm. Which is, we should talk at some time about, like, we also have a different school. We have the Sports Academy, which is helping the kids, predominantly on the lower end. We also have a gifted school.
Yeah.
And we should talk about that because as great as Alpha's academics are, gifted's like in a different plane.
I want to get to that.
And, if the theme of that school is parents of gifted kids know standard schools holding their kid back. They don't know how much. Like, I have a kindergartner in 6th grade math. My 3rd and 4th graders outscore 50% of high school graduates in this country.
Right.
I mean, when we talk about 1550 SATs, our middle schoolers are 14 to 1500 in gifted school. Just crazy performance of what they can do when you group. That is one where we do test we test kids to get into that one, and right, and those kids, you put 100,000 the smartest, the vision of the head of school. He's like, I'm going to collect 100,000 the smartest kids in the world. We're going to turn these kids up to 11, and it's just going to be awesome what they do. Like they came up to me and they're like, Mr. Liemandt, we're going to be the last human smarter than AI, right? I mean, they're just so excited. They're just like, we're going to learn so much, and it's really great stuff.
But I want to do two things. Yeah. First, I want to give you a little more credit, and I want to back something up here because I'm known online as an extremely skeptical person. Most of what I do is calling out people who are lying, for example, about the Ivy League admissions process, and I'll publicly call them clowns, and I'll break down why they're messing things up. And the reason why I do that is because I think there's a valuable function that serves that, and not enough people are doing, where you're actually verifying things, and we're saying, what is this really happening? Is it true? And so, in preparation for this interview, in part because I saw some crazy claims on Twitter, about some of the things that, X now, some of the things that your kids were doing. I wanted to go see this for myself, right? And so my wife and I flew to Austin. We actually met these students. I was able to interview them. I was able to hang out around them. And what was crazy to me, because I work with teenagers day in and day out, and one of the rare things you ever experience with teenagers is that they can articulate themselves. They're motivated. They're excited. There's a light behind their eyes. They will go gush about the project they're working on. That was something I saw at your school. If you're a parent of a teenager listening to this, ask yourself, how often do you see, your kid or your kid's friends doing that? Most parents would say they don't. Yeah. Right. And it's especially true post-COVID. It's especially true in a traditional environment because your kid isn't doing anything that they're personally interested enough about that they would gush about it in the first place. But I saw that at Alpha School. And the claims that were being made, if anything, actually they're being underplayed, which is crazy. And, it's something that I even get criticized for this in my program as well. So, for example, I do a lot of the same stuff that you guys are doing, but on a boutique level, right? So for example, one of my clients, was the youngest person to fly solo to all 7 continents, right? Another one of my clients, refertilized 100 acres of farmland around New Orleans. Yeah. Another one of them, is building this really cool company that's building 3D printed prosthetic legs for dogs. Crazy stuff is going on through my program, and people say, oh, well, Andreas and his program must be this, absurd, magical thing he's doing with his kids, or he's picking out only the super talented kids. The reality is, if you get a motivated enough kid, in any capacity, you show them a path and you guide them, they are actually capable of these phenomenal things, whether people want to admit it or not. And the gifted kids are even crazier. Something you tell me this because you actually know the math. How frequent is it for somebody to be quote unquote gifted, right? So let's say you're like 2 standard deviations out in a class of 40. How many kids do we have? Like what, 1 or 2, right?
Yeah, right. And
it's a lot.
Right, so going back to your program, and stuff is absolutely exactly what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
Is we're just doing the same thing. We put them all in a building together, right? And
which is even better, and stressing them out less.
And socialization matters, right?
Yes.
And being around, the sports academy kids, being around other kids who want to be D1 athletes, and
it's great,
right? And if you crush your academics, your odds of getting a D1 scholarship double. Same. Every coach will say, same athlete, better academics, they're going to give the scholarship. At Alpha, these kids are all trying ambitious things, right? And it is hard, right?
Yep.
But, and someone was trying to build up his Twitter audience, and he's just like, oh, this is impossible. I can't do it. I never can do this. But Saeed, who's the one who's doing the Al Pacino movies and all those,
Saeed would not let that pass.
Right?
Yeah.
And Saeed's just like, dude, here, let me help you out. Like, this is so easy. Give me a break, right? And, and it's one thing for an adult to say, look, you can do this, right? It's when your peer does it that you're like, okay, I can do it. Because literally people are like, if Saeed could do it, I could do it, right? 100%. I mean, he's great, but the other kids are like, well, I'm as good as Saeed, right? And
it makes it real for you.
And it's super real. And so, and just, there's another student, she has 2.5 million TikTok followers, right? And just, has a huge audience, and there's this view of like, oh, TikTok, having a big TikTok audience is bad, and social media and all that stuff. She's going to Stanford, right? She's 1580 SAT.
She's one of the reasons why I found out about you guys in the first place.
She's considered a role model. Like every mom in middle school, literally they're like, I want my kid to be like, her. Yeah. And so all these things, but when you're in that environment, it is awesome. But if you had known these kids, when they were younger, you want to, like, back to when we select them, when do we, those examples we gave. I mean, these kids, they've been there for 10 years. We figured it out when they were like 4 or 6 or 8. Like, oh my God, that's the person who's going to have 2.5 million followers and go to TikTok or whatever. It's no. And that's the part of, the core of what parents need to take away is, look, school had to be school the way we had it, like for whatever reasons. It does not need to be that, right? The next decade, it does not need to be that. We can rebuild all the schools in this country where kids can love it, work on stuff they love, crush their academics in just a couple hours a day, and love it more than vacation. I mean, that should be our standard. If you're a parent, that should be what you expect of your school. And if you have a high-end private school, you should expect that, right? Public school is probably going to take a longer because you've got to get more people aboard. But if you're at a high-end private school, like seriously, like tomorrow, like say, why doesn't my kid love school more than vacation? Yeah. Right? Why aren't they crushing their academics? Yeah. And, your program that you have, it'd be like, yes, the school should be doing this too.
Oh, hands down. Right. And I want to talk especially about where the schools are failing, I think, on both ends. Because, it's funny, there's an enormous amount of funding that has been dispersed, especially recently, for special education, right? Which, that's the term at this point for kids who are typically underperforming academically for one reason or another, right? They're not meeting the same kind of standards, and then they get additional support, and that's wonderful for them. I think there's a second kind of special education, which is, we would call it gifted education, right? It's just as prevalent. It's nowhere near as supported. And I think I want to talk a little bit, if you're comfortable with it, about like our experiences in high school, because I think we fell into this category to an extent. I remember, and this is going to sound somewhat arrogant to say, but I'm saying this because I know there's other kids like this out there, that, I was in school, I was in, all the AP classes, and I was bored out of my wits because I was working for maybe 5 minutes maximum to maybe 10 for the class. I understood everything. And then the entire rest of the time I was just staring at the ceiling or reading a book or doing something else. And like, for the love of God, I just wanted to get out of there because, people, I think we see this with athletics. Right. And, if you're a sport parent, you know what I'm talking about now. Have you ever met, you've, I'm sure, met kids who are going to go D1? Yeah. those are not the same as all the other kids, and it's not close, and it's not like, oh, I don't know if my kid's going to go D1. No. If your kid's going to go D1, you know your kid's going to go D1 because the spectrum of human achievement in sports is Pareto distributed. It's so wide, right? That D1 kid is way out there. Academically, and you probably know this from hiring people, I imagine, for software too. The idea of a 10x engineer is based on the idea that, in fact, there are people who, intellectually speaking, are way out there, and it's not close, and it's not like a little bit different, and you can't put them 1 year ahead and have them be okay. They actually need to be going without that kind of limitation, and if you don't have the capacity for that, and traditional school absolutely does not have the capacity for that, well, those kids are just racehorses stuck in a cage trying to get out. And then you have behavioral problems.
No, and I think that's a big, to go into this, which is when we talk about, you don't understand how much these kids are being held back, right? That, I mean, it's crazy when you let these kids loose, back to your racehorses. Yeah. Just, they are crushing through the material, right? And, we take in gifted kids, right? And, I was with a mom last night and she's like, 10-year-old son, and she's like, for the first time in his life, he said, school's hard. Right? And it was just, he had never been at a school that had challenged him ever. Right? And now he's in an environment, right, where he's challenged and he's loving it and he's thriving because of it. Because who wants to be bored all day? Right? And one of the things that, with gifted kids, we teach them terrible habits, which is we teach them, you don't need to try hard, right? You don't need to excel. You're stuck and you're just trying to get through, and we lose all their capability, right? Because it atrophies away, right? And with this, you're like, no, you want these kids just the same way. And if you have D1 athlete capability, right, you need to be using it. Right. It's the same thing on the academic side, that you want these kids pushing us. You want the kindergarten who can be in sixth grade math, in sixth grade math, 100%, right? Or high, right? Or high, and just keep going. There's no cap, right? On where these guys can go. And so back to, we hope to have the first high school student published in Nature. Right? There's never been a high school student, right, who's been a lead researcher published in Nature on, that's usually you got to be a PhD, 100%, right? And we're like, no. We're kids can do awesome stuff now, way more than we expected, way more, right? And that's and as a parent, you're just like, okay, this is fabulous that these kids can do all these awesome things. And if it's GT school, which is you love academics, right? Or you want to crush the athletics or the business side, all those projects you talk about. I want to I want to publish Broadway movie. I want to promote all these movies. We have the girl who's doing her Broadway musical. It's just it's just amazing what they can do. 85% of the parents are like, I thought this was impossible, right? And whether on the GT side, the academic stuff is just is crazy.
And there's a level, I think, where you even go beyond what a book or a school could teach them. Right. And that's when you have to get into the experiential learning. And I'll tell you this because I'm curious to see how you guys are handling this, because one of the most valuable experiences I know I had when I was growing up was, when I was in high school, I got to go work at Brookhaven National Laboratory, and I was working with a physicist, and I was working with particle physicists. And if you've ever hung out around particle physicists, those are some of the most abrasive humans on the planet. And thank God that I was around them, because for my personality type, that worked out really well. But these guys threw me through the ringer. And I think I was 15 the first time I presented in front of a group of them. And I'm never going to forget, I've been working at the lab, I think, for like maybe a month. And I presented some of the work I was doing so far. And this Russian physicist stood up, and he just tore me to shreds. He ripped it all apart and then showed me what I should be doing better. And then I learned. And because I was pushed to that standard, to the standard, to actually what it's like to do it right. Not, okay, what's acceptable for a high school kid? How are you guys solving that problem? How can you get those kids that are ready to start playing with the adults?
Totally.
How does that happen?
Well, that's our high school program. So we've been talking about K through 12. Let's talk about high school. So K through 8, we talk about becoming learn to learn, right? And being a self-driven learner. And a lot of it is around just academics, that you could just crush an academic. By the time you get into 8th grade, right, because we don't have teachers, right? So, these kids at Stanford and, all these schools are going to, they haven't had a teacher in 10 years, right? They've all been self-driven learners. And So by 8th grade, you have to be able to get a 5 on an AP test on your own.
I love
So
it.
you just pick a random AP because, everything you want, every kid believes everything I need to know is on YouTube. They know whatever they want to learn in life.
It is.
Right? It's on YouTube somewhere.
Well, MIT OpenCourseWare is all in there.
MIT OpenCourseWare, everything is available. And so all the kids know that. Now, this is the whole question of, well, are you motivated to do it?
Right.
And so back to our students, they're all like, yes, I know how to get a 5 on the AP and by 8th grade. Now, when we go to high school, it changes, which is, all these life skills, all these passion projects they're doing, we can't hire guides and coaches who know all this. I don't know how to launch a Broadway musical or make a Pacino's movie, be number one, at the art opening or whatever it was.
Right.
All those things, I don't know how to get published in Nature, to be honest. So all of those things, the kids, we move it from, I'm not self-driven on academics. I know how to go excel in the real world. So we use the term the term we don't allow in high school is good for your age.
Oh, I love
That's like
that.
the worst. We use the term Olympic because Olympic is the only term where when it's applied to a high schooler, it means best in the world. No one's like, oh, that's a good Olympian for their age. They're like, no, that's a gold medalist. That's literally the best in the world. And they're high school aged.
It just so happens.
Right? And so we tell all our kids, whatever you're working on, whatever project you have, it needs to be Olympic level.
I love that.
You're not compared to, oh, I'm good for a 15-year-old, right? I'm best in my age. So like this week we had, South by, and there's all these things about, AI in education, South by EDU, and using OpenClaw. And,
all the OpenClaw projects were crazy.
Right, all this OpenClaw stuff. And our kids, right, we had a 15-year-old get up and he presented. He's like, oh, I built this OpenClaw thing. I made $30,000 in the last 10 days. And he's presenting to, 1,000 adults, who are there.
They wish they could do that.
And they're like, one of them was like, holy shit, how old are you? Right. And, but our students view is, yes, I should be as good as any of these 1,000 adults or better, right? That's my benchmark is adults, right? Because there's no reason I can't be, right? And so, there's no reason any kid at Alpha can't know more AI than any adult, right? Because the adults, our Austin kids, actually our New York families, right? We have schools all over the country. Our New York's families saw some of this and they are like, can we fly up those Alpha kids to the New York campus to teach the adults?
Yep.
Right? They're like, right?
That's part of the reason why I went there.
Yeah. And it's just the expectation of these kids. A Broadway musical, right? Whatever it is, published in Nature. Just what is normal adults. And to your point about the criticism, so one of the life skills we have is by the time you're in it, receive feedback is one of the most important life skills you can teach a kid. Right? If you have kids, right, receive feedback is a good test. We actually, every parent wants their kid to be self-confident and resilient, right? Everybody's like, yes, I want those, right? Nobody says no to that. They all want that. But there's a set of parents who don't want their kids to receive negative feedback. And, part of our whole program is showing parents and students, but the parents are the hard part usually, is a good sign of self-confidence and resilience is the ability to receive feedback, right? If you can't receive feedback, right, you don't have self-confidence, you don't have resilience. And so exactly what you had, like with the lab, right, you were able to bounce back. So by the time you get to 8th grade, to pass our receive feedback life skill test, you have, in kindergarten, you have to receive feedback without crying. Right. That's our kindergarten test. Right. We have some high schoolers who transfer in who fail that test.
Yeah, it happens a lot.
But in our world, that's a critical skill.
It should
By
be.
8th grade, our students know the key to me getting better is seeking out critical feedback from experts. The same thing every athlete does with game film and coach.
Oh, 100%.
Every athlete's like, coach, tell me how to get better. Tell me how to get better, right? And there's this view in academics, you don't do that, and our students all know how to do it, and they have to, every parent, you hear all these hypey stories about Alpha, why the parents love it so much.
Right.
The one that's off the chart is when your 8th grader, right, your adolescents come in, and and he's like, Mom, Dad, I know I haven't been a good member of this family. How can I do better? And then every parent's like, okay, Alpha's the greatest school in the world. Oh my God. Because,
No, most people would think their teenagers trying to punk them at that point.
Correct.
Like, that's what it sounds like.
And that's like one of the life skills tests. So in high school, posting online is a good example. Like it's the same place. You know who's as harsh as your physicists?
Oh, yeah.
Or the haters on Twitter.
Oh, all of our comments on social media are crazy.
Right. And so our students, this is one where, back to building up self-confidence and resiliency, we don't throw kids in the deep end and say, just go post, right? We need, our guide's job is to make sure, okay, one, become an expert in the field, right? You can't be posting, crazy stuff in your field, be an expert, but then now start posting things and being able to receive feedback. And back to growing kids, right? When you received it from that physicist, it was better than if it came from your parent or your teacher.
Oh, thank God.
Right?
Yeah.
And, you as an adolescent, you ignore your parent anyway, right?
Oh,
and
I was the worst.
Right? And
Yeah.
but so like we had one of the students you met, and this happened on Twitter this week. I won't call him out on it. But, he posted a message. He was in a thread with, a guy with respected guy, hundreds of thousands of views, and he was interacting with him. And, and then the guy's like, hey, I really liked your explanation, except at the end, your sort of smugness and arrogance lost me. And I know when that alpha kid read that hurt, right? Because he was in there. And now his reaction was, and he replied, he's like, I'm so sorry. Thank you for pointing that out, right? That, I got too carried away.
Yeah.
Right. And that kind of interaction, right? It did hurt, right? There's no way that, getting slapped on Twitter in front of everybody.
Oh, yeah.
When it was obvious. But back to human growth and potential, that's a great experience for a 16-year-old kid he's crushing it, right?
Yes.
He is doing really well, but he needs someone in the world who he respects.
Oh, yeah.
To be like, hey, little modesty here, right?
Oh, 100%.
And, there's no way his parents could deliver that message, right?
No.
And but so being in the real world gives real world feedback to these kids, which helps them grow like crazy, right? Now we have guides to support them and stuff, and some people on Twitter are unfair and stuff, and so our girl with 2.5 million Twitter followers, right? I mean TikTok followers, right? I mean,
it's out of control.
Yeah, you get the hate, and you have to learn, right, how to isolate it. And if you talk to her, how do you deal with this when she talks to the other students, and she's like, look, if you're going to go down this path, there's no avoiding it. You have to realize it. Now, she also has stories. She's like, I've also changed kids' lives, and that makes it worth it to me.
Yes.
Right. There was, she has a story of, there was this girl on. Anyway, I won't go into that story, but she has changed kids' lives, and so that makes it worthwhile.
Right, and I think that is super healthy too, because one of the things that I've been playing with is how do you get, like, let's say, an Ivy League result for a kid who didn't go to an Ivy League school. And I say this, partly because I had to experience this myself. I mean, I don't know how much my backstory I told you about before, but like I had to turn down multiple Ivy League schools that I got into because I couldn't afford it. I wasn't offered financial aid, even though my family should have probably qualified. And that put me in a quandary, because like I had expected that all the hard work I was going to do was going to culminate in this sort of elevation into this network of other people where I would meet, let's say, my co-founders and so forth, and I would have the ability to expand in my career as such. What's special about social media is that if you play it the right way, it puts you in touch with all the right people, right? Now, the downside, of course, is what you said with the haters. I mean, like, I get multiple death threats a week at this point, right? Which is, it's the reason I bring it up is because it's not even that I say anything that in any reasonable sense ought to have that result. Like, it's not like I'm even political. I tell people, oh, you should take your SATs and do your homework and try extra hard in school. Like actually, and like the response that I get, like I had a video I posted the other day where I said, adults who wish they were kids again, are losers in a sense, right? As a kid, we should be telling the kids, you should have such a spectacular life as an adult. You shouldn't want to go back. It doesn't mean you ever had a horrible childhood. You can obviously enjoy parts of your childhood and reminisce nice things. I'm not saying you should have a lousy childhood. And like one of the comments I got was like, it's such a Dickensian thing. Like, I'm like, No. What I'm saying is we need to have kids aim higher, and we should be telling kids that the best time of their life is still ahead of them.
Yeah.
And that life actually gets better as you get older, which it does for everyone who actually pushes themselves.
Yeah.
And, the reason...
And to that point, just to take on that one, because that's a real, is, our students read Rational Optimists, right? Matt Ridley's Rational Optimists, which is, I just believe, back to educating kids, I don't understand why you don't want kids to be optimistic about the future. I don't understand why you're like, I hope I can drive this 12-year-old into the ground with depressing stories about how the world's ending. I don't understand how you're like, I want to develop kids, and that's the way to do it.
Oh, I do.
And there is...
I understand that. You want me to tell you?
Yeah.
Here's why that happens. Because there are systems that are built to control people. Mm-hmm. And people who are pessimistic, and people who are depressed about the future, and people who are told, oh, stay in your lane, that's the best you're going to do, and the world's out to get you, are really easy sheep to hurt, frankly. And the people like you that are going to disrupt something, and the kids that you're teaching that are going to go out and change things, well, those people are dangerous.
Well...
We don't want to be scared about those people. But sorry, go ahead.
But that point, like AI doomerism is a good one, right?
Yeah.
That what's really interesting is, and I do believe, right, AI is going to have, different effects on people, adults, right? If you're an Uber driver in Austin, Texas, and we got Waymos and robo-taxis and stuff, I'm like, okay, there's a career change.
That was so sick, by the way.
Right? There's a career change coming because this is how you're going to do it, right?
100%.
And so not so great for them, but for kids, like and back to alpha students. Yeah. Alpha students in high school are like, you adults, you're cooked. We are taking over the world, right? Because
I love that.
These AIs give us superpowers. It lets us do things, back to the adults, do things that we could never do before, right? Do things you do, right? And we're coming for you. No, there's a guy, one of my students, and he's posting on Twitter because he's like, I spent a lot of money building this time back software, right? My background, I've been software for, decades. And he's like, Mr. Liemandt, I'm coming for you. He's like, I'm totally going to build a better time back software, and he's like, I'm going to become a millionaire by building my own better one. And he's literally releasing things, and he already has, a couple dozen of the students who are like, oh, I'm going to use his software. This is a call out to you, Austin. Bring it. But it's just awesome, right? He is not intimidated that this team of adults and I built this software. Instead, he's like, the students and I are totally doing it. Right. And that kind of view, the rational optimism, these kids, the world's AI is going to give them superpowers, and they can have a great world that they can go build. And I believe that's very much what, when you go to the alpha environment and go to our schools, that you see, and it's reflected because the kids are awesome. They're
amazing. And what's special, too, about that, I think, is that even if he fails, right? I don't even know what failure would look like. I don't think there's a way to fail. Because if you're built in that kind of a thing, once you're on that track, so what's the worst case scenario? Well, he's going to learn a lot about software development. He's going to learn a lot about educational technology. Maybe he'll have an idea and some skills that, when he's a little bit older and, the next thing he tries, that's way more likely to be successful. And he has all this runway that he already built.
Correct.
Oh, no.
Right. No, all this stuff. If kids are doing their, our whole thing in high school is, you only need 2 or 3 hours in the morning. So spend your afternoons doing these, passion projects, right? Your peak stuff. There's just no downside to kids working on that, right? I mean, they love it. No, he wants to get all the kids to get a 5 on their APs, and in return, right, we're bringing down 100 Stanford and MIT kids this summer to Alpha to start re-envisioning college, right? And what would we're K through 12, but college obviously is going to transform. So we're bringing him down. He's like, can I be part of that program with all these kids, right? And I was like, well, one of the things all these college kids are doing, they work like 80 hours a week. Like, they're coming down to make it an intense summer because they're very worried that their college degrees aren't quite worth, what they expected. And I'm like, so it's going to be super intense if you want to. He's like, sign me up, right? And I'm like, okay, if your software works, you get a 5, we'll put you in with all of them. Yeah. And you're just like, how is that bad? Right. Right. It's just, back to there's no failure here.
Right. And I want to talk about that. So first, I want to talk about the outcomes from the school, because that was a huge deal to me to hear about that too. And then I really want to talk about what the next steps are for these kids. So say you spent all this time in Alpha School, you're getting trained at this level.
Yeah.
And I sort of probed you, I think, on this before we were off camera, but like, what on earth does a student like that do when they're put back into a trad environment at a lot of these colleges? So first, I mean, are they getting into great colleges?
Sure. So the answer is yes. So, our first graduating class was only 2 years ago, right? 11 of the 12, there's only 12, right? Parents are very skeptical. If you don't have teachers, is any college going to accept them? And so understandable, right? No parent wants to have their kid, be an experiment. And so of the first 12, 11 got in their first choice college. The 12th didn't want to go to college. He's actually the world's best #1 water skier. He's building a media business around his water skiing. He's thriving. He's doing great.
Phenomenal.
But the 11 is, we had people who got into Stanford and Vanderbilt and NYU Shanghai and Parsons, when we talk about design, just so they get into all the schools they want to get into. And so 6 months, this was 2 years ago. Then 6 months later, at Christmas, I got them all together. I'm like, hey, how's college? What's it like? Since, what are teachers like for you? You know? And all of them, first off, had all 4 O's. They were crushing college. The college is really easy. Like, we are totally prepared to do well here. However, these 100 series lectures are a total waste of time. Oh my God, they're like 5 of them had written editorials to their paper, right? So like you could go read in Vanderbilt's where she's basically like, look, this is just a farce. Right. The teacher's in front of this class of hundreds of kids. The kids are sitting there spending an hour scrolling TikTok, right? And then we leave. It's just a complete waste of time, right? My daughter, who's the math major, is just like, yeah, I don't really understand my math professor, and I just do Math Academy, and I'm
sure she's doing great.
No, and she's crushing all her her subjects. So they all can crush their academics. The big series classes, right, are always even and the universities sort of know this. Harvard issued their thing that Harvard professors say AI tutors are better than Harvard professors. So the Physics 101, did an A/B study of their students.
Significantly better.
Yeah, same thing. The AI tutor kids learn twice as much. I'm like, oh, surprise, surprise, right? And and so these 100 series lectures, right? That's going to go away. Now, the other thing they said though is they're like, these small group workshops that we're in, we love those, right? And we're sitting around and talking. So I believe that when you look at what is a university and what do they do, there's going to be some people, when you get out of Alpha, you're equipped to either, our view is to go to a top 20 university if that's what you want, right? Or go start your own business or go do whatever else you want, that you have choices, right? And we just want to make sure that you have both. And for those who want to go to college, right, there's a whole set of things that a college is, right? It is your dorm mates and right, my daughter's in a sorority, and there's all the social things that you want that, as a parent, you're like, okay, I and not to call my daughters out, I'm like, yeah, they need to grow up a little more, right? They're, I don't want them at 17 years old to go, launch a business or something. I'm like, spend some time, right? Now, do they need to graduate? And is that credential the most important thing in the world anymore? I don't think it is, right?
No.
And I didn't graduate, and I dropped out of Stanford, so I'm biased, obviously. but the point is of equipping them. They absolutely have the skills to go to college. They are self-driven learners. They can go learn whatever they want to learn on their own, and and I believe colleges are going to have to change. And what you'll think a college experience like, just the K through 12 is going to be radically different, right? In 10 years, you're going to walk into what K through 12 is versus what our generation went through, right? And it's going to be totally different and way better. And I believe college will be very different too 10 years from now. Now, around that.
Tell me then about, and I want to switch gears outside of Alpha for a second, because you also have a background totally distinct from this. And, if you're hiring someone today, right, what is the actual background you're looking for? And I want to, because I think people go to college for a lot of reasons. Like the title of this podcast is Go Ivy or Go Free, right? Not an accident, because I believe currently that the way that the college system has been set up, the value is bifurcating. It's very K-shaped, right? Either you're going to go to one of these schools with huge brand name prestige, in which case the getting in is the valuable part. It's not even the graduating, right? You get to say for the rest of your life, you dropped out of Stanford.
Correct.
Nobody's really concerned that you're not smart enough to have gone to Stanford, right? Because you got into Stanford. Likewise, I turned down multiple Ivy League schools. That's part of the reason why I get to do what I'm doing in my business, because then nobody doubts then what I did otherwise, and I have other credentials too. But like that was the part that people really cared about. Or, if you're going to go to college, let's say you're not going to go to one of those colleges, by God, why are you paying $100,000 a year for it? That's the part I don't understand. Yeah. So, like, let's put on, I guess, your CEO hat for a second here. Like, if I'm a kid, I'm graduating, let's say I didn't have a chance to go to Alpha School because, it hasn't been built yet, it's not expanded to your part. What should I be doing to make myself ready for what's about to come?
Totally. So, we there's a program, Gauntlet AI, here in Austin, and that is to replicate the value, right, of what would be a CS degree from the best schools. And there's three things when you think about the value that employers are looking for. And so here's the pitch. Here's the pitch of the company, which is come to Gauntlet. It will be the hardest 10 weeks of your life, 100-hour weeks, right? But it'll be free to you. So free tuition, 100-hour weeks for 10 weeks, and you will be guaranteed a $200,000 job if you get through the system, if you pass. And so, and what the skills are is they are becoming the world's leader in using AI to build software. And, they've been running it for about a year. It started last January. And, back to the skills, what are the parts? One, they do filter. There's a cognitive test getting in. Second, they're getting the second, if you're an employer, why are all these employers being like, I think they have more employers than students now because everybody wants these graduates, right? Right. The economics basically are, you get a $200,000 job and then the company pays the search fee, the standard search fee. They just pay that amount to the school. And so then because of that amount, they can just give it to you for free, and fly you down to Austin and do the whole thing. And so the three things that, employers want, one is, are you smart? Second, do you work hard, right? 100-hour week, sort of a good proof of work. And then third, are you leading edge in AI? Like that's the skill that everybody wants. And it's a skill that anybody can go get because nobody has it, right? Right. And so being leading edge is really easy because you're the first ones, right? You're going to be the leading edge. And so then there's huge demand. You get ahead of the curve. And then all of a sudden you're in a company where you're the AI guy, right? And all of a sudden, right, your skills compound. And so, that's an extreme example of how do you quickly retrain somebody. They're now working with the U.S. government, right, and creating government programs of, okay, how are we going to retrain this? And as AI sort of rolls around the industry, like the Uber drivers and all these things, lots of people are going to have to get retrained, right? And we're going to need these retraining programs. But that's fundamentally what are the skills companies are looking for. Yeah. Now, then you get into all the life skills. This is where, the second part of, what are the other skills? Hard work's a great one, grit, right? Receive feedback, right? Teamwork, right? These are all the life skills. When we talk about alpha, we say, okay, here's the core academics, and we obviously crush those, and have great test scores. But then, what are the life skills that really matter, right? And it is teamwork and leadership, right? It is receiving feedback. It is uplifting others on your team, right? All of those soft skills, resilience, right? Those are the skills that you really want, and you're like, schools need to teach that. Yeah. Right. People need to develop this. And I believe as the academics gets easier to teach, it frees up the time for these other ones. Yeah.
And I think it serves, a really important psychological function too. Like, are you familiar with how the Marine Corps does training?
Yes.
So like their induction, ends in the thing called the crucible, right? They have this really, really hard challenge. People aren't sleeping for multiple days. Like Navy SEALs have something similar. And, while it's, I'm sure, a taxing thing, it allows you to show your skills. I think one of the most important pieces of it is that it's a very powerful demarcator of your passage from, let's say, a recruit to being an actual Marine.
Yes.
And that sort of rite of passage, I think, is missing right now in American civilization. Like, we don't have a point where we tell kids, okay, you are now an adult.
Yes.
You are now capable. You are now ready. You are going to go out into the world. You're going to dominate. And that's it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's no going back. And you wouldn't want to go back anyway, right? Because you are good to go. And I love that part, and Alpha School, I think, does that, right?
Yeah. Rite of passage, right, for thousands of years have been really important to human development.
In every civilization.
Every civilization. And just human development needs rites of passage.
Yeah.
And they've all had it, right? And, it used to be, going to elite universities, and it was hard.
Right.
And when everybody wasn't getting A's, like I wasn't going to get straight A's at Stanford, when I went. But, those kind of passage, they're obviously important signals, but for the people going through them, they really matter, right? Back to the bonding and, all of that activities. The kids at Alpha, when you ask why are they thriving, it's because they're doing hard things that are moving them from being a kid to the adult world, right? And that's what's just so shocking to all the parents when you say, "Oh my God, it's because these kids are operating in the adult world," and they're like, "We've just as a society stopped having kids do that." Right. And the answer is no, it's really healthy to have them do these kind of activities.
Exactly.
And there's no reason why they thrive because of it.
Yeah.
Right. And if you talk to Alpha parents about, what their dinner time conversations at high school are like, they're talking about real things. Like, Maddie, who did the Broadway musical, her dad was talking to me. She's like, "Oh, today was a tough day for Maddie because, she got into she's having to learn about music licensing rights. So she's putting on the first all-teen produced Broadway musical.
So cool.
She sourced, as background, right? She sourced all the singers off TikTok, right? And, scored it and, developed it and all these things, and tryouts and just, producing a Broadway musical, right? But all teen produced, acted and such. But, she literally got into a talent war where she was like, well, this singer is better than this singer, and I'm going to put their song first, and now this one, unfortunately, the second one had millions of TikTok followers and got very upset and was like, I will scorch the earth,
Oh my God.
And it's like, welcome to being a producer, right? And so then, and Maddie's like, oh my God, she's 16 years old, right? But she worked through it and was like, okay, we're gonna have two, right? And trying to remember exactly how I solved it, two lead songs basically to solve the problem. I mean, every producer in America would be like, oh, yes, I deal with that every day,
of course,
right? And she did. It was the first time. I'm sure every adult producer, the first time it hits, it's an eye opener, right? And she just did it at 16, right, and then now it's great, and she can fill 1,000 people into a venue, and it's a huge success. And it's just, but her dad, and mom are sitting at the table, and they're like, that's what we were talking about tonight. We weren't nagging our kid, have you done your calculus homework? Right? We're literally talking about real things that's really engaging, right? And that kind of things, it not only transforms your kid, it transforms your family, of the discussions you have and things like that, which is, super powerful for, once again, developing kids.
Yeah, the result is just so much more interesting. Tell me a little bit more about where this is all going.
Great.
Right? So let's imagine that, these kids, they're going to college. We want to see the colleges improve.
Yeah.
Where are the pain points? Where are the things the colleges are missing that, let's imagine we had to make, colleges a little bit like Alpha School.
Yeah.
Give me a product critique. Where are the areas that they should be looking at to do better?
Well, let's talk about how we're coming out with a new set of products at high school.
Yeah.
As a product orientation, we'll talk there because my real answer is I'm not sure yet. That's why the 100 kids are coming down from MIT and Stanford, because I'm like, we have to go figure this out. Right? College, and so we obviously have our Alpha high school base. Right. And so, I've been working on the high school a lot this year. And so we can talk about that, which is Alpha High right now, or, is a school that the parents love more than the kids. And it's actually an interesting thing, as a principal of school, on K through 5, what really matters, like when we're letting kids into the school, is that the parents are aligned. Right? Do you believe in all our philosophy? Like, if you don't believe in screen time, then you can't come to our school, right?
100%.
And if you don't believe high standards are the key to your kid's happiness, don't come to the school, right? And so the kid, the parents, kids want to just make their parents happy, K through 5. As you get into middle and high school, it completely reverts, right? And back to like Dr. Yeager, who sets all our guide training, right, about the science of motivating kids 10 to 25, right? Back to rites of passage, tying it back to that, in K through 5, you just need to keep your parents happy, right? But then you had to be accepted by the tribe, right? As you hit adolescence, which was thus the reason for rites of passage. You're like, I have to move out from basically being the mama's boy, right? And I have to be accepted by the tribe, right? We literally were back to rites of passage. We had some of the alpha kids, because we're setting up some schools in Africa, and they were watching some of the tribes in Africa, their rites of passage, and they are sitting there, where they take burning embers and they put it on your leg, and you can't flinch, right? And literally the Americans were there like, what's going on here? Why are you doing this? And they're like, well, this is our rite of passage, which is, if you are being charged either in warfare, and this is still, we're in, tribal Africa, with a spear, and someone's coming out with your spear, you can't flinch.
Right.
And if you can't put up with that, you're going to flinch. Or if a tiger or lion is charging you, you can't flinch. And so this rite of passage is, the indication. And that's their day-to-day life still, right? And they're like, that's why we do it. Right. And so these rites of passage of, moving into being an adult what we care about at high school is, do the kids want to come? Because the parents are K through 5. Yeah. And even if parents want their students to come to Alpha High, we don't care. We're like, do you want to come, right? Are you into this? Because this is going to be hard. This is going to be challenging. I can't give you your motivation on this one, right? Do you want to do this awesome program? And, back to the product, kids in the rite of passage, you care what the social scene thinks, right? This is all of Dr. Yeager's, which is you move to, and why kids, in 5th grade will do anything to make their parents happy. But a couple years later, they will do things they know their parents will hate. They will know it, but if it gives them social credibility, they will do it. They will do it. And it's just natural, because they're trying to get accepted by the tribe. Right. And so for us, we're very much on acceptances. Do you want to be here because you care about what your social circle is? Now, so we have a school where all the parents are like, oh, go there. And if the kid wants to be the quarterback at the Westlake football team, right, or the head of the cheerleading squad, they shouldn't come to Alpha. Right? That's not our school. And so here's what we've been developing, which is we've been developing new products, right, for the kids, where we're like, we are going to lean into what you guys love. Right. Yeah. And so we're coming up with, the students are developing right now. They're literally saying, what would make all my friends, want to come here? So, one of them is going to be how to make $1 million in high school. Right. And so that the students who are motivated, by money are going to be able to make $1 million. So they're still going to be able to do Ivy League academics, right? 1550 SATs, all that in the morning. But in the afternoon, they're going to learn the skills of how to make money, right? How to build a business, how to be an entrepreneur, right? We're going to have a second product that they're working on, which was why they were in Africa, is they're working on a world school, which is go spend a year, hardest year of your life, right, building alpha schools, right, around the world, right, so that everybody has access to this, right? It's a service year, but you still get the Ivy League college academics around it. As a second one, the third one is have a 75% chance of getting into a top 20 university, right? For those who want to, your go Ivy before the go free part, right? Of just how do we determine that? Right. And then the fourth is D1 scholarship.
I love
right?
that.
And so we look at that, and what we're designing is, okay, what are the things that if you're a high school kid, you're going to be like, 80% of the kids were going to fit into one of those buckets where they're like, yes, I would love school more than vacation if I got to do that all day. And those skills develop me, right, as a person.
Yeah.
Right. That whether you're the kid or the parent, you're like, okay, this is what kids should do. We have 4 years to spend. They don't need to spend in class all day studying APs, all that, right? They crush that. What should they do the rest of the day? These are the kind of programs that we think are there. And related to that, the way they're designed is, and back to as we talked about community, getting around like-minded kids who are trying to do the same thing, who can motivate and help you, and they had the win, and they're able to explain, well, this is how I did it, right? And you learn from each other and all that community together. I believe whether it's, AI is going to change a lot of things and the world's going to be different in 20 years. What I believe 20 years from now is really true is parents are going to drop their kids off at a school or at a building. We won't call it school. They're going to drop their kids off at a building, and in the building are going to be other kids and adults, right? School, it'll be totally different if we do our job right than, we all went through. And I believe that's going to extend up to university, which is, I still think university can exist, but it's going to be because we're going to get a group of like-minded people who have a goal that's super hard, right? Back to your rite of passage. It's going to be the super hard goal, but they're all going to go work on it together, and it's going to be awesome. It's going to be hard, but they're going to want to do it, right? And much like an athletic, a state championship football team, except, oh, wait, I want to do this big production. I want to start a business. I want to go and save the world, right? Whatever my program is, I believe a lot of what high school and college, right, they'll start realizing we can do so much more. These kids can do so much more. We have to unleash them. And it's going to be these kind of projects that you work on that are going to be the future of why would a parent send their kid to university? It's going to be because I love the other kids in the university that my kids are going to be around. They're going to be doing something that's super hard. They're not wasting their time. It's not 4 years of partying, right? And you develop and grow as a human by doing hard, challenging things, right? The struggle, fail on your road to success cycle. And I believe that's what universities can provide.
That's phenomenal. And I want to just jump back to the high school level for a second, because I had a question there too. Because you're talking about these, 4 separate academies, right? That are unbelievable, right? So, for example, you want a kid to be a D1 athlete. You want some kids to learn how to make $1 million, which, if you haven't done it before as an entrepreneur, that is actually a learnable skill, right? But how do you get the kind of people to teach these things that actually could do it? Because I'm going to be candid, because that was one of my big problems when I was in school. And I mean, you probably experienced this too. One of my biggest issues learning in high school was that I didn't respect my teachers, right? There were some that I did, and I had a handful of teachers that were phenomenal. One of my favorite teachers, he used to be an engineer professionally, and he was very, very talented, and so he was way above me. And so it was easier for me to learn from him because he could crush me. And I needed to have that because so that way, I understood that there was something to get from him. How do you recruit that kind of talent?
Right. So the first, back to economics, right? You have to change the economics of teaching, right? Which is, you can't recruit the best people by paying them the least in existence, which is just sort of our whole system, right? I'm my business worlds, when you come in and you're like, everybody's like, well, good education doesn't scale because there's no great teachers, right? Great teacher equals great school and all this stuff. And I'm like, well, how about you just pay them more? I mean, not to be like super radical on stuff, but I'm like, so like at Alpha, right? We pay a minimum of $100,000 for a teacher. In places like New York, it's like $140,000, for a teacher, because we're like, we need to go get the best right here. And so part of it is just, we'll design an economic model where you can do it. So let's talk about the Be a Millionaire project, right? The answer is, we're going to have the world's best entrepreneurial talent, right? One of the things, successful adults overinvest in ambitious kids.
Yes,
right?
They
do, because
people underestimate that,
and everybody does it, right? The mentorship that they're going to announce, the set of mentors who will do it, right? My ability to call anybody and be like, hey, do you want to come help out? Right, super successful people totally want to do it. I mean, Stanford is just this litany of all, part of what I loved about when I went to Stanford is you just literally have everybody just come and give a talk, right? I got to, Steve Jobs is on campus. Okay, I'm going to go have lunch with him. Right, and you literally just get to have lunch with Steve Jobs, or Bill Gates would come down, or Scott McNealy with Sun Microsystems, and you're just sitting around. And today it's the equivalent to Sam Altman or NVIDIA, right? Jensen. You're just sitting around these great guys, and you're like, well, why are they doing it? And they're like, well, they overinvest in kids, right? And that whole network, right? You can totally do that. If you're on Twitter, right? Back to everybody being available. All this super expertise on Twitter helps all these kids out like crazy, right? They're like, here, let me help you. Let me give you feedback. Let me do that. So one element is just they accept. The second is you can build an economic model that actually drives it. So, for example, on the $1 Million Project, it's going to be an expensive tuition. It's going to be $150,000 a year tuition, but it's going to be a money-back guarantee if you don't make your $1 million. And we have to structure it the correct way to do it. But fundamentally, it's, look, if we unlock human potential, i.e. teach you how to make $1 million, right, it'll cost $600,000 to do that.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And we're going to have $600,000 budget per student.
That's a lot.
Right? Which, when you think about how much you do at a Y Combinator, incubator, and all this stuff, we have 4 years, right? So we have longer time frame that we have to spend the money over. But we're going to be able to go hire great talent that teaches these kids these things, right? And so we just have to be confident in our program that we're developing them, right? That we actually can do this. And we believe that we have enough success so far that, from a business model point of view, we're like, oh, this will totally work. Right. And so a lot of this is, we have these restrictions on how we've done academics historically. But when you talk about just budgets and underpaying teachers and all these, crazy things, unlocking human potential is the most valuable thing in the world, right? It's the most important thing a society does. It's the most important thing, a family does. But it also can pay for itself, right? We believe that if you develop humans, right, you can make more money, right? And I believe that's a dichotomy. And, when you talk about universities and education, somewhere, and I don't remember exactly the statistics, you might know, but 80 to 90% of the families in America think the reason my kid should be educated, go to a good school, go to university, is to get a great job.
Pretty much.
Right?
Yeah.
Get a great job. It's like 80 to 90%.
Oh, yeah.
80 to 90% of traditional educators in America don't think that's their job.
Not even close.
And they think it's literally the opposite.
Oh, yeah.
Right? To your point of the guy who walked in on the first days, like they focus on success.
Oh, it blows my mind because I actually got into a Twitter spat with somebody about this recently because there was this viral tweet that was like, the goal of education in like the 1st century was development of virtue. The goal of education in the 5th century, development of virtue. Goal of education in the 18th century, development of virtue. Goal of education in the 21st century, college and career readiness. Yeah. And I looked at that and my first thought was, okay, who's being educated? Who's being educated in all those centuries? Yeah, can we be honest about that? Yeah. Because education, all the way up till maybe 50 years ago, was an extremely elite product, right? It was something that, it was the Aristotle model, right? It was, we're going to get a couple Aristotles. We're going to teach maybe a few thousand people total on planet Earth, okay, at that level, right? And that's how you got the Harvards and the Yales and all the rest of them, right? It was a very tiny model that was being built like that, and those people are necessarily going to have a different goal than a modern system would today. The legacy system is not developed for my kids or your kids or people, because to be candid with you, the development of virtue, I think we've moved that. I'm not sure if moving it aside is really good. It's certainly
I think
a valuable goal.
One of the things I would to this point that I'd look at as a good model, if I had to pick, if you said there's one model that we're going to figure out what university is and all of that.
Yeah.
But if you said you had to pick one existing model today, there's a thing called the Cosmos Institute.
Yeah.
And the Cosmos Institute, right? It's like the philosophy department of Oxford, the AI department, the guy who runs it, has sold AI companies, but he's a philosopher. And what he is building, what he believes the job is in a time of AI is to create philosopher builders.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's the combination of where you do want the virtue development, right? Where, yes, we want good people who care about this, right? We don't want this crazy unbridled capitalism that's not where we haven't educated the full human, right? And so it's, what is it about the classics?
Yeah.
But we don't want just that, which I believe there's a whole set of people who say that's enough.
Yeah.
He is like, and Cosmos is like, no, you have to be a builder too.
Right.
Right. You have to go build things. And it's the combo that is going to be the future of university.
Yes.
And I'm somewhere in that world where if you said today, if there was going to be an alpha university, I'd be like, we're going to create philosopher builders.
Right.
Right. That's what the real answer is let's create philosopher builders to have both sides to it. And it can't be either or. So what's the future of college? I believe that what we want to create are philosopher builders, right? The Cosmos Institute has this great program that they're, in philosophy that they're doing. And, it's the Oxford AI and philosophy departments come together. And the guy who runs it is, had an AI company, but he was, spent, years on a submarine. He, DOD, came up through that side.
That's awesome.
And, then started 2 AI companies that he sold. But then after he sold his companies, he then was like, let's and then started reading all the great books, right? All the great philosophers. And he's like, okay, this is going to be the future of university. Now he's building also of, okay, the AIs that are going to be teaching people need to be based on philosopher builders, right? And so when I think of what university will be is you want the virtue development that you get from philosophy, right? From the classics, from the great thinkers. But it's not standalone, right? It has to be with the builder part, right? And back to being an entrepreneur and those kind of things. AI is going to allow kids, adults, right? There's this concept of, you get superpowers. You can run these, entrepreneurs there's going to be, I think, an explosion of people who used to work at big companies who are going to be entrepreneurs.
Right.
And AI is going to enable just 1,000 entrepreneurs, right? Millions and millions of entrepreneurs, just 1,000-fold. And I believe that if, as a school, that we look at and what we would do and when we see a university is, let's go have schools create philosopher builders, right? And that's one where you get both sides, right? You're like, this is the best way. You're going to have a great job and be able to a great life, and that's one of the goals. And then the second side is for the academics who are like, look, there is a set of things about developing a human that are really good. I believe you can combine the two of them.
Tell me something. In the current university system, right? I can see that an engineering program would make a really good builder. Let's say MIT is a great example of this. Do you think that the way the universities are teaching right now are making good philosophers? Because I have a gripe with them, and I think you might agree with this part too. There's a lot of kids that are going to these schools, and I know because I work with them, even ones that have great test scores, they don't know how to read anymore. And when I say read, I'm being a little bit, bombastic when I say that, because, reading, I think at a college level is more than just like, okay, yes, can you put some sentences together? Sure. Can you read the caption on an Instagram post? Sure. Right. But can you sit down for 5 hours and read Dostoevsky? Right. And actually know what you read at the end of the 5 hours? Right. That's, I think, the standard I would be used to holding them to. And I speak to college professors all the time. And what they tell me is that none of the kids are doing the reading anymore. Right. They don't know how to do that. How do we fix that?
Yeah. So yes. So I believe, back to just, my world's K-12 and not much university, but, in K-12, we have a massive problem, which is kids don't read or write.
Right.
We have high school kids who transfer in from these high-end private schools, and they can't write a grammatically correct third grade sentence. Yeah. The problem now with ChatGPT is you can just chat up your paper, right? And you just type it in, and you never learned how to write. You never learned how to write a sentence, a paragraph, an outline, an essay. And So you've totally just outsourced that capability and never learned it. Reading, and so that's one. So that's a huge thing that we put in, and one of the things why like our AI, our Alpha Write teaches you to write. Right, it's a critical skill. I'm sure you see it on college, applications where the first time parents realize their kids can't write. Because the schools keep giving everybody an A, so the parents are like, of course my kid can write. He got an A.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden they get an FRQ on their AP.
And it's a shock.
Yeah. And they're like, oh my God. Or they read their college admission essay and you're like, oh my God, my kid can't write.
Right.
Those are the two big, and unfortunately for them, it's too late, right? You're like, well, we should have started in third grade teaching them how to write. So writing's one, reading's the same.
Yeah.
Which is, they've taken out books basically, and long form books. And kids, even if you assign the books, they're just ChatGPTing the summary to walk into the class.
100%.
Right. And so there's no depth.
Right.
There's no depth. And so, we worry about this a lot, right? And so our reading program, we believe how we solve it at Alpha is, the fastest way to teach kids to read is actually not just giving them a book. The problem with giving kids books on learning to read is a book is a bundle of things together. So first, it's a Lexile level, right? And the learning science says if a book is more than 10% above your Lexile level,
you're not going to
right? It's too hard. There's too many words you don't know, and so you can't take context because there's too many words, right? That are missing, and you have too many variables, and so you're disengaged. The second is it does have a theme, and you're like, oh, do I like the theme, right, or not? And so you're am I interested in this book? And then the third is, it's reading comprehension. Like, were you actually paying attention? You take a quiz at the end. Maybe at the end of a chapter, but at the end of a book, it's just too long, right? That's just bad learning science, right? You need more active recall. And so those things are actually, so when you hand out a book to a classroom, right, all of a sudden you lose a bunch, you lose a third on learning science, on the Lexile level, right?
Right.
You lose a third of what the recall could be because you don't do it till the end of the book, the quiz. And then you lose kids because they're like, oh, I'm not interested in this. And so, what we do at Alpha is we have Alpha Read. And so Alpha Read is short form reading that is going to teach you vocabulary and reading comprehension, right? And it's going to sit here and give you short form, couple page articles. It's going to make sure every paragraph that you read the paragraph, because it asks a question before you scroll to the next paragraph. So it's going to make sure you're going through it, and back to our scale, of how much learning, I'll leave this out, and, our reading by third and fourth grade versus other schools, our kids are 3 and 4 grade levels ahead because these other schools just are stopping. They're just not teaching reading. Kids aren't. They're just not reading anymore.
Right.
And so that, but then once you learn how to read, then we have to get you to like to read for length, because short form is the opposite, exactly what that problem is. So you have short form reading, so they're super skilled. They can read, they have Lexile, they have, the ability. Now, how do I get them read for long? So we have an app called Teach Tales, where you can take a kid who's like, I hate books, right? Second grader, third grader, boy, I hate books, and you're like, dude, what's your favorite movie? The Avengers? Yeah. And who are your soccer buddies? Okay, thanks. And then it generates a choose your own adventure story.
Oh, that's
where
awesome.
He and his buddies are saving the world, right? And it's generated at their Lexile level, right? And that kid will sit there for hours clicking through his choose your own adventure, right? Just going through it. And the AI can give him an unending stream of content, right? Which will teach him length. Right. Then you have, because you do have to teach length. Then once he has length, you're like, and now you get to read a book. Right. And then you start teaching them the classic books, and you give them, Perseus or, whatever, if he's the Avenger guy, you'll give him the Greek books and mythologies and stuff. So, and that you can replicate that though now. I mean, Colleges need to do that,
Yes.
right? They're getting kids. I mean, that's, we have kids who transfer in and, they'll be in middle or high school and we're like, okay, start, go back and learn how to do this and learn how to read for length. And yes, here are books that you're going to read.
And that's the part that gets under my skin, right? Because I feel like in a book, and I want to steel man, I guess, the case for books for a second here, because there is a lot of people, I think, who, as a result of the technological change that we've had, as a result of the fact that video has gotten so much cheaper than it used to be, are now arguing for the idea of not reading, right? And part of the reason why I think books make a difference is because books are just a higher IQ medium, to be honest. Like, I am the lowest IQ I think I'll ever be in my short form content. And I get criticized for that, I think, because there's a lack of nuance. We go to a podcast and you and I can sit here and talk for hours, which is awesome, right? And that allows us to go way more in depth. But the thing that we can't do is I can't stop our conversation midway now and go away for a week and ruminate and think, that idea that I expressed was maybe not the right angle on this.
Correct.
And then come back and fix it, which in a book the author did.
Yes.
Right? And when you read great books, that's what you're getting.
Yes.
Right? You're getting somebody who's thought about this stuff for months and years and then got to that point, and it's a lost art, right? Like, I mean, you mentioned this before. I mean, you guys are doing some collaborations with universities. Now, how many kids at these universities are just not even getting this stuff? Even elite schools.
Huge. No, kids, the point of it's an epidemic and kids can't read books is totally true. And even at the elite schools, if you talk to the professors who run the seminar series, right, where they're supposed to be reading these books,
Scary.
The kids aren't. I mean, you can talk to the high school kids, and they're like, oh, look at this great book list we have. Yeah, talk to the kids. Like, one of the things parents should do is it's not about what the school says they teach.
Right.
It's literally just go ask the kids.
100%.
Right? And there's just no way, right? And the kids are like, yeah, I prompted my way and I got my summary and I, got into it. So that it's totally true. And to your point, here's, back to, we to make kids learn 10 times faster, we really have to know, right, the learning science of how people learn. And to the point you're trying to make, there's two parts around why reading and writing matters. Writing is thinking, right? And so when you talk about, you want to when you're learning, what you're doing is you're rewiring your schema, right? And while you write, it is forcing you to be disciplined. Like, I can say things and it's not fact checked right here,
100%.
and I didn't really think through the whole thing and what's exactly what you're saying. But when writing, I have to do that, right? And by forcing myself to put it on paper, and there's literally neuroscience behind when you're writing or typing,
moving your hands.
Right? Yes, you are actually releasing chemicals that are helping you reshape how your brain remembers, right? What is your memory schema? Reading, right, is the same thing, which is the problem with reading is it's just like anything. If you give a kid a book, the same way when I say earlier when I was like, if you give that 8th grader who's age 8th grade but can read at a 3rd grade level, if you give them 8th grade material, it's a waste of time. The problem is these kids don't have the fundamentals to read the books, right? And so it's reflected in, I can't read the book. They have to go back, right, and do all the groundwork. Their vocabulary is not big enough, right? They stopped, schools have stopped teaching multiplication tables. They've stopped doing,
and that blows
spelling
my mind
bees.
too.
Kids' vocabularies these days, right, are just, they're too small to read the classics. They just don't have enough words, right? They can't.
And I have to critique the engineers for this, right? Believe it or not. And I say this as someone who does a fair amount of engineering too these days. Like, I think there's been this meme that people have had where they say, oh, I'm not good at memorization. I don't need to memorize anything. I can Google it all anyway. And I think and I love that you're shaking your head with that, because I think from doing this work that is fundamentally misunderstanding where creativity comes from. Right? Because if you're going to be a creative person in any domain, it always starts with memorizing a bunch of stuff, and that's necessary for automaticity, right? You have to have the the sort of like basics of, like, let's say, like, if you're going to do math research, right? And I've done really abstract math research. You need to be able to do integrals in your sleep. It shouldn't be effort, right? Because if it's effort, then you're focusing on that, and you can't focus on the larger scale problem that you're actually trying to solve. And then once you have all those tools in your toolbox, then a lot of what people will end up calling creativity is just, oh, oh, I pulled this one tool from this field and now I'm applying it to this new field, and then poof, I have a discovery, right?
Yeah, and you are 100% right. And just here's, I get this a lot because of AI,
please,
right? Which is, there's a whole set of people, including like the co-founder of Anthropic, the big AI company, who literally are like, my kid's not going to have to, I'm going to make sure they go to a school where they don't have to memorize things. And I'm like, okay, I literally can hear there's 40 years of learning science papers you could go read, right? That's going to tell you how bad that is. In AI, we have a concept that if you reason, like if you have an AI reason, but it doesn't have a fact base, right? Facts to act on. It's called hallucination. Like literally we have a term for it. We're like, oh, the AI is hallucinating because it doesn't have a fact base. When a kid reasons, because every parent's like, I don't want my kid to memorize facts. I just want critical thinking, right? Critical thinking is reasoning. A kid who reasons, i.e. critical thinks without a fact base, we have a term for that. It's called making shit up. Like the kid literally just is, right? You need a fact base. This whole concept that you don't need to know facts. There's no learning science behind that. It's literally the opposite to your point of
100%.
Right? You need vocabulary. You need to be able to memorize your multiplication tables, right? Those are things, our students, our third graders, every third grader at Alpha knows this, which is if they do fast math fluency, right? So they memorize multiplication, division tables, all that stuff to fluency, right? Where it's effortless recall. Then it takes them 11 hours on average to do that, right? And they have this great app, and they run through it, and they get it. Now, fourth grade math, if they've done fluency, 30 hours. So all of fourth grade math in our system, right? How it's 10 times faster. It only takes 30 hours to get through fourth grade math.
That's incredible.
To do fourth grade math without fluency, 62 hours. And so every kid is like, well, obviously I'm going to spend the 11 hours, so I save 30 hours. Even a third grader can do that math, right? But you literally have whole school systems and parents telling these kids don't do this. And that's like, when you talk about an ROI, it's like an instant ROI. Think of the rest of your life, right? Of the thing. Vocabulary words are the same thing. There's this whole concept of just all this memorization's bad. It's not. We wake up, when we talk about Alpha, our job is to take, there's 4,000, 5,000 ideas, facts, ideas, and concepts that have historically indicated an educated person. And we wake up and say, our job is to fill the kid's head with that knowledge, right? That is what a school's about, because our job is to make the kid's head an interesting place to hang out in. Because they're going to hang out in there the rest of their life, right? And there's just all this offloading and all. You're like, what are you doing? You want to load all this into your kid's head. It makes it interesting. And when you talk about being creative, right? The more, and there's also all the learning science. The more you know, the faster you learn. So like every other school, learning slows down as they get older. Right? At Alpha, it goes like this. Right? Because the more you know, the faster you learn. And
you have your fundamentals.
Right. You have your fundamentals. Actually, analogies, right, are one of the fastest way to learn. And the bigger your knowledge graph, the easier it is to make an analogy that works. Right, which is 100 times faster than having to ground up construction. Just all these things, right? And so all this, learning science, right? The reason we're able to do all this magic is this has been published for 40 years. And sort of the traditional schools have just all gone away from it, and sort of for whatever common wisdom is gone. And so we're just bringing it back. But to your point, and then let's bring this all back to reading,
please.
Which is writing is the best way to rewire your schema, and why it's so important. And so that's why if kids are ChatGPTing, you're just like, oh, you're just right. You're not
depriving yourself.
You totally are. And then reading is basically, to your point, some guy has taken his entire life schema, right, and all his learnings and lessons and rich examples, right, that have complex threads through it all, right, and put it down for you in a super compressed form for you to read through, right? And basically, when you're reading these books, you're taking what your schema is, layering on, right, their schema and seeing where the delta is and being like, I'm learning, right? That's what learning is
Right.
when you see the delta of how you saw the world versus their view of the world. And that's where learning come from, because you're like, oh, I never thought about it that way. And in my schema, it's different.
Yeah.
And that causes you to rewrite yours.
Yes.
And back to the complexity of the thoughts you can have, right? In long form media, you could have way more thoughts, right?
Yes.
And, and so podcasts are better than short form, but it's not as, it's easier to have holes, right? There's not as enough rigor in it, right? But in writing and reading, you have the rigor.
It's different,
right? It's a different level of rigor, back to the mastery level where you have to have mastery of it. That's what reading great books are. And, that is, and a lot of what we do is, how do we make sure our students are reading these books? Right? Because, and how do you create an environment in a school where they read books? And how, when you're in a small group seminar, how do you make sure, what happens if the kids haven't read the books?
Yeah.
Right. A lot of, there may be one or two kids who like to read, right? There's always a couple readers, and they may have read the book. They're the only ones who are going to talk in the small group seminar, and everybody else is going to, read off their ChatGPT summaries.
Yes. But if you can make them read, then they have the chance to participate.
Right.
And I want to go a step further with the writing, because I think there's an even bigger benefit. And you tell me, I'm going to let's pay a really big bet that you've done this, that when you're, let's say, going into a new venture you want to invest in, do you write out your thesis?
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
And I do that too. Right. And on a different scale, I'm sure. But like, when I want to make sure I'm on the right track, I sit down and I write long form essays. Like, I'll write almost a small book about what I think the future is going to be.
Yeah.
And then I can course correct it, and I can examine my ideas, and I can be self-critical. And what it gives me, and this is the part, I'll go back to the alpha part, right? In investment, alpha, in a lot of cases is, are you able to predict something different than the mean, right? How clearly do you see the future, right? Because that's the thing that people if we were to distill all of business down into one idea, or of investing at least down into one idea, it comes down to that pretty much. Like, are you able to predict the future? And there's, I think, two areas that, in my opinion, academia is failing right now, which is that, to your point before, we're not giving kids that context. So they're not reading great books as much. You're depriving them of the cultural and context and a lot of the rich information that people would have used to form their predictions of the future, right? And so that by itself can make you hallucinate. And at the same time, then they're not learning to write, so they can't even self-critique on whatever fact base they do have, right? And so, that I really want people to understand that. Like, if you're going to write, it's not just that. Sure, okay, we clear up our thinking, and sure, there's the self-transformation. That's what makes you a prophet, right? When you're a prophet in your industry, you're the leader. You're the leader because you saw that future so clearly, and you can see it clearly because you wrote about it.
Yeah. Part of our whole view is, how are we getting these kids ready for the AI age?
Yeah, and that's
so we have a concept called the brain lift, which is, the data structure for human knowledge. And this is, in high school, we teach every kid about this. We think this is the skill you need to have to thrive in an AI world. And so, it's structured, it's a learning science-based structure, which is, there's a concept in learning science of depth of knowledge, DOK 1 through 4. DOK 1 are facts, right? That's the memorization no one likes. The second are summaries. I read an article, I summarized it. The third level is, I have insights. I'm able to look at the facts and the summaries and the data set, and look, I have insights about it. And then fourth, our DOK 4 is my new ideas, my new creative ideas that no one else has. And that's sort of the, schema for knowledge. And when you talk about stuff, when people criticize, standardized tests, most of them are DOK 1 and 2.
Yeah.
When you get to FRQs, you get some DOK 3s on the APs. But fundamentally, that's how you're developing that. And the part, back to the memorization, you can't do the DOK 3 and 4 without the 1 and 2. So you got to have the
100%.
base. There's no skipping it, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I want to win the Super Bowl, but I don't want to go to practice. I don't want to run. I don't want to tackle. But I want to go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
You're like, huh? And so, anyway, the DOK 1, so our students create these brain lifts. Because here's the way to think, to your point of value and what's value add. If you can put a prompt in the AI and it gives the answer that you have in your head, you are the industry average. Right? AIs train themselves by just reading everything on the internet.
100%.
And so whatever the average is, that's what it gives you the answer.
Yeah.
And the question is, what is your unique value? If you want to be creative, what do you see in the world that no one else sees? Right? What is your creative angle on everything? How are you putting things together that no one else is? And we teach kids, and so AIs, LLMs do DOK 1, 2, and 3 pretty well. Your job, right, and what AIs allow, and it allows, creating new knowledge used to be a PhD level thing, right? That was the definition of a PhD, is I'm creating new knowledge for the human knowledge graph. But we teach, hey, high school kids, you can totally figure this out, and you do your projects. So what they do is, let's take me as an example. If I went to an AI and I was like, build me a great school, it's going to say, oh, you should have a teacher in front of a classroom and there should be 30 people there, and it's, a traditional school. And if I said things like, there's going to be no teachers here, but it'll be the best academic performing school in the world,
they'll tell you wrong.
It's going to say, this is unethical and I can't help you or something, right? I mean, it's going to say some crazy thing because of it. Now, the way AIs work is you have to load their context. And so AIs in that case can't help me. Right. They're useless to actually help me do what I want to do in my job.
100%.
And so the question is, how do you get them? How do you be unique, but also have the AI help you? So I have to load up my DOK 1, 2, and 3, which is my brain lift, which is all the learning science papers, all the proof, all the test scores from Alpha, all that stuff into the AI's context and say, analyze all this. And now help me design a school without teachers. And all of a sudden, right, where all of a sudden it's like, oh, I totally can do this. This all works. And then it helps me.
It becomes an enhancement.
And it becomes an enhancement where it's my aid. But it's because I have these crazy thoughts that no one else has in the DOK 4 level that then allow me to make it, and that's my unique value. Right? That's my unique value for the schools. And then, what other life skills people want? And, all these things. And, back to how do you get into college? How do you get into the Ivy? How do you have a 75% chance to get in the Ivy League? Our students have built a brain lift that says, because if you ask an AI, it's going to say you have a 6% or whatever, exactly.
Well, no, it lies about way more than that. You want to know something? I'll make this really specific because I have a very hard time. And you probably experience this. I think most domain experts will experience this if they try to talk to an AI about their own domain. And I think it's like a variation. I don't know if anyone's coined this term yet, so I'm going to give it a shot. I want to take credit if it's me. I think there's like an AI version of like the Gell-Mann effect. You ever heard of like Gell-Mann amnesia, right? There's an AI version of this going on right now, which is like, you can tell that the AI is on a very like low level for your domain, but then you assume it's like perfect for everything else that you just aren't the domain expert in. So I had this happen to me recently when I was talking about test optional policies at Ivy League schools, and I put into the AI, hey, like write me a caption for this post where I was explaining that like all the Ivies had agreed at this point to go back to requiring the SAT. And it's like, well, no, I can't do that because you're not telling the truth, because Columbia didn't agree to go back to the SAT. And I said, actually, no, they signed a contract with the federal government to restore their funding that requires them to reconsider the SAT at that level. And just because they didn't have a press release that announces a test required policy does not mean that they're not effectively requiring the SAT. And then I had to load that particular contract into the AI, and then it looked at it and it said, well, okay, maybe, right? And I'm like, no, not maybe, right? Like, can you work through the implication with me? It's like, oh yeah, well, I guess they kind of have to do that. So they do require the SAT, don't they? Then?
Exactly. No, that exact point. And that's what you have to, the way to think of an LLM is it's read everything on the internet, and you have to tell it what part of its brain to go to. Right? Where, there are different theories. There's an inquiry-based way to learn versus direct instruction, and they're diametrically opposed. And so when you ask an AI, it's going to be like, well, what's written about more? And it picks that one. Right. And it doesn't mean it's quote right. It just means it's more popular. So when you have unique ideas, it's usually because it's less popular, right?
100%.
Good ideas are anti-mimemic, right? And, that's why they're good ideas, because if it's mimemic, everybody already knows it.
Right.
So unique ideas are anti-mimemic. And so you're like, oh, go to that part of the brain, right? And then you have to load your brain lift in. So all our students learn how to do this.
I love that so much.
And so that's the kind of skill, when you talk about what are the skills that really matter that you have to develop, where you're like, here's how I'm unique. And I can load it into the AI, and then the AI can help me. And so we literally tell students, we're like, look, if you can prompt your way through with no brain lift, right, all that's saying is you're the industry average and you're going to have no unique advantage. So if you're trying to, start a musical, it's not going to work, right? No. What's your unique take? And so the kids learn, okay, I have to be able to learn, how am I unique? What's my creativity? But they also have to come up with those ideas. They have to do it on the foundation of facts, right, that already exist, right? Because you do. If you just say, oh, schools don't need teachers, you're like, wait, can we go through some fact base on that, right? And, and kids say all this stuff that, it's crazy. And you're like, go figure out the fact base that's under it, right? Figure out your DOK 1 through 3 below it. And so, anyway, that's the kind of thing when we talk about what are the skills kids are going to have and how it's going to be different. And there's no, I believe we're the only high school in the world who teaches this stuff. I believe universities are going to have to teach this stuff. That these are the skills that really matter for the world that's coming. And kids love it, right? I mean, back to building them and documenting and using AI to do all this crazy stuff. It's because they know how to work with it, and it assists them. It's not their enemy. It's why they think adults are cooked, because they have these brain lifts. They're making $30,000 in 10 days and just doing all this stuff, and they're like, what's launching musicals, doing all this stuff. They're like, AI totally helps me do all this.
It's incredible. I want to ask you, I guess, a more personal question with this, because this is obviously a really cool project. I love this because the truth is, and people might listen to this and be skeptical. I encourage you to go check it out for yourself. But what I love about it is that whether this works fully at scale or not, I love that you're trying something new, and I love that you're taking the feedback and you're giving it a real whole try, and you're putting enough resources behind it. And we haven't talked about this before, but you've invested a ton into this, right? And you had a very successful career that let you do that. And I have maybe a separate question that I hope we can play with for a little bit. Why are more people like you not doing this? Because my whole life, I was taught that I should work hard, and then I should build companies, and I should try to be successful, so that one day when I have FU money and I have an FU network, that I can go look at the world and say, what are the problems that I want to fix, and just go start fixing things. Because I mean, what's the point of working so hard if you're not going to go do that?
Exactly.
But I only see a handful of people at your level that have even dared to try this kind of problem. You're doing something really wonderful and altruistic. So where does that come from, and why are more people not doing this?
Let's see. Complex answer, but let's talk through a couple. One is, we teach all our students, right? The key to your happiness is contributing to your community, right? And it's, Alderian psychology, right? And, they all read The Courage to be Disliked. And, and there's nothing, when you talk about the mental health crisis in middle and high school, there's nothing better for kids than to realize I got to get outside my head, and I need to just help people. And nothing makes me happier. And, that's the kind of thing that we could teach. And, I say that as a preface to, I'm living that my own life, which is, I had a great career. And so back to the background, right? How did I get into this? We didn't talk about that. So in high school, I wrote a paper on AI. This is in the 80s. And there was a paragraph in there that said, neural nets are decades away. Back then, AI was expert systems and ontologies. And so I went to Stanford. I was in class with the father of AI and expert systems, Ed Feigenbaum. He talked about this, if you could build this type of product, it'd be worth millions and millions. And I looked at my classmates. I'm like, why are we in Spanish class? I mean, so we dropped out, right? And we built this product. And our claim to fame in the 90s was we were the first AI product to sell $1 billion. And, it was old school AI though. And so I built a great software company, and then Alpha got started, 12 years ago by McKinsey and Brian. And, my kids went for a decade, but I always was like, McKinsey, this is, education's not scalable. You just can't, it's great for Austin, it's great for our families, but, sort of, oh, well, great for us. And then when Gen AI came out, 4 years ago, I was like, neural nets are finally here. And McKinsey, we can use this to scale to 1 billion kids. We can take the magic, make it scalable, make it great, and get this out to 1 billion kids. And for me, because I have resources, I took $1 billion out of the software company. I'm a product guy. And so I'm like, I have to go solve this. I have to get in the mix, right? And so I was like, McKinsey, you got to make me principal. Right, I have to go see what happens when fifth graders get into a fight, and what do the parents yell at you about, and how do we build great product to do that. And I jumped in, and I wasn't sure at first, but now I can tell you 4 years later, this has been the best 4 years of my life. Like, I am loving it. This is way better than my old career. I'm going to do this for the next 20 years. We are going to get it out to 1 billion people, right? We have tons of challenges ahead, lots of issues, right? To do that. And, so a couple things. One is, to all the people out there who have been really successful, come on in. This will be the best thing you've ever done. Like, it is awesome. This is a great, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you want to educate kids, right? It's the most important thing, right? There's nothing more important for a family or a society than raising its next generation, right? It is the most important thing on planet Earth. The greatest untapped resource on planet Earth is human potential. And so unlocking the next generation is the most important thing to work on. And we now have the opportunity for the first time in 100 years to transform it. And so this opportunity is awesome. Now, and so come on in. And that's part of what my job is to go get the best people who haven't been in education
and maybe
to be in education. Well, and let me talk about, why don't they? Why haven't they done it? So when I got in, so I went and talked to a dozen billionaires who'd all donated at least $1 billion to education. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I'm going to throw $1 billion in. What do you think? They're like, it's a total waste of money, Joe. Don't do it. There's literally no return. Any money you put into education is literally lighting it on fire. You can donate to any other cause and it will have a bigger impact on the world. And so there's a universal belief based on their facts, right, that it's useless, that there's no hope. The system can't change. You have examples where people had given $1 billion and they were able to move a school system from bad to good, but then a decade later it was snapped back. It was bad again. And so it's just an unsolvable problem. And I think when we talk about education in general, there's a view of like, who knows? Like, how do you can solve this, right? That it's just an unsolvable problem. And so there's that pervasive view. Now, me being like every other entrepreneur in the world is like, well, they're idiots and I'm going to fix it and I'll be different, right? Because that's what every entrepreneur thinks. I'm like, well, you guys must have been idiots and I won't be, And I mean, it's that's just sort of the nature of the beast.
You have to be like that.
Well, yeah, that is an entrepreneur, right? Yeah. I in the 90s when I used to give lots of talks at like Harvard Business School and Stanford Business School, and I'd go to the business schools and I'd be like, none of you guys are entrepreneurs, right?
Because you wouldn't have been in the business school in the first place.
And I'm like, here's the kids drop out of Stanford engineering, right? Yeah. They don't, and at the business schools, I said, here's the difference between an entrepreneur and an MBA. An MBA, you're going to put this awesome spreadsheet together, right? And in the cells, right, it's going to sit there, and one of the cells is going to show that this business model doesn't work. And you're, as an MBA, like, see, it doesn't work. Right? And so thus it's a bad idea. Mm-hmm. An entrepreneur is going to look at that same spreadsheet and be like, see that cell? I will change it until it works. I will move heaven and earth until that gives me the answer that makes this work.
That's right.
Which is sort of me. I'm like, everybody told me, oh, this doesn't work. This, the spreadsheet doesn't work for education. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go change the cells, right? I got to go change the reality of what reality is.
People told me that when they told me that, oh, you could never coach a kid to get them into an Ivy League school. It's just an intrinsic thing they just have, or they don't, this magical thing. And I look at it and I say, I know I followed a mechanical process. I can reproduce this. I spent 10 years reproducing this with my kids, and I ended up writing this whole freaking book because it turns out you can actually distill more or less what you have to do to 75 pages. It's actually, not only is it not mystical, it's straightforward.
Totally. You know? Exactly.
And that's the difference.
Exactly. And that's the difference. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go in and I'll be the most well-funded principal in the history of mankind, and let's go do this. And, you know, and the first thing, you know, back to giving time back, the first thing it was look, we need to have kids learn 10 times faster. You know, and here's the story actually on how we got the 2 hours is, you know, so I'm my first week, I'm principal, you know, and McKinsey has had, you know, kids must love school as, you know, and so I go up to these fifth graders and I'm like, you know, they're new. I'm like, hey guys, do you love school? And they're like, no. And I'm like, what would make you like school, love school? And they're like, less school. And I'm like, how much less? And they're like, none. And I'm like, okay, that seems a little light, guys, like as a principal. I was like, how about this? Would you engage in these apps? If I gave you some apps, would you engage in them? Like really, no screwing around, right? Just, but engage in these for 2 hours. If I made the 4 hours so awesome, right, that you just love the rest of the day. And they're like, okay, that's a fair trade. Right. And so I went back to my engineering team and my learning science guys, and I'm like, guys, we have 2 hours. Like, we need to figure this out of how we can take and, you know, 10 times faster, 2x in 2 hours, because that's what the kids are going to give us their attention for that long. Right. That's, and that trade-off, right, where, you know, back to the cell I had to change. Nobody believed you could build an engine that would teach kids 10 times faster. I had done enough learning science research and, you know, read about it where I'm like, this is totally doable. We hadn't done it yet, but it was totally doable. And so the part about it was, okay, I had to go build a great product, right? And so when I think about why other people don't do it is, first is there's a theory in education that all of it needs to be nonprofit.
Which is crazy.
Nonprofit is, you know, the number of people who talk to me and say, if you do for-profit education, you are unethical and you are the worst person in the world. And, you know, the only thing worse than
1,000 times.
The only thing worse than someone doing a for-profit education is an evil billionaire doing a for-profit education, right? And so, like, literally, when I got into it, right, there was not. You talk about the hate comments.
Oh my God, nonstop.
No, and so, you know, all the other people who have $1 billion resources to donate it, they donate it to nonprofits, right? And that's the mechanism to fix it, and that hasn't worked.
Well, I think that's fundamentally unethical too. And here's my 2 cents on this, and you tell me if this makes sense to you, which is that, you know, if you got to the point where you're successful enough that you have $1 billion to donate, it's because you have a vision of the world, an ability to predict, an ability to build that is much more than the average person. And therefore, you should have a responsibility to manage that capital appropriately. And if you give that to a nonprofit, to be candid, if you've met the people who run nonprofits, they are not the kind of people who would ever be able to accrue that kind of money because they just don't have the skill. And it's a rare skill. So you should be stewarding that investment and put your own brain behind it.
And agreed that I believe back to, you know, there's a whole different discussion of good philanthropy, bad philanthropy.
Of course,
but to the point, I looked at all that. And there's one other point of nonprofit. I gave a presentation at a Masters of Scale conference of how to scale things. And, you know, and education's not scalable. And I'm like, the reason education's not scalable is because it's nonprofit. Nonprofit equals non-scalable.
Guaranteed.
And, you know, the reason for this is
basically
it's just economics is, especially, I'm a product guy. I'm like, so I have a pool of donations, right? This is how much money I've been donated. If I build the world's best product, the pool goes away quickly because I use it all up because everybody wants my product. And then what do? I'm stuck. So like, if you in the version of that in education is there are good charter schools in this country who have 3,000 person wait lists. And you go to them and you're like, well, why don't you open another campus?
They don't have any money.
And they're like, I'm waiting on a $40 million donation. And, you know, we're for profit. Thus, you know, a lot of people don't like us and think it's evil. But here's what I do get out of it. I had 1,000 people at my New York info session.
That's right.
Right. I had 1,000 people at the New York info session. If I need a new campus,
you're good to go.
Capitalism will provide the capital to grow, right? That I am super scalable, that as long as my product is delivering, right? I'm going to have infinite capital to keep growing. And so, and when you think about education, $1 billion, while a lot of money, is a drop in the bucket. We spend 1 trillion. We spend 1,000 times more per year, right, in K through 12 education. I'm like a very little drop in the bucket, right? Now, I'm the Archimedes lever that's going to move the world. But, this whole thing of, going in and being for profit is what's going to allow us to scale.
Right.
And so there's that element. Then other ones about for profit of why and why people. So if you donate, that's why people haven't. Second, there's a view that education is just a really bad market. If you actually stack rank industries, by return on invested capital, which any investor is going to look at, healthcare is number one and education's in the bottom. And it's just like there's no money in here. It's a terrible business. There's just nothing here, and you can't build a good business. So they should all be nonprofits because you can't have a good business. And so it's sort of this cycle. And so part of what I believe my job is to show the world you can actually create good businesses that do well, right? That aren't evil and terrible. And, and I understand there have been for-profit educational businesses that have been bad. That doesn't mean for-profit's bad. It means those businesses were bad.
100%.
And so part of what my job is to go show that you can build these awesome companies that educate kids, right? That develop them as people that people want to buy, right? And show that they're good businesses. Because fundamentally, when you talk about education, if you step outside it, from the objective sense, is actually a great market. It's not the worst market in the world, which is, if you survey families will spend 10 to 15% of their income on a transformative education for their child. They care. There's nothing a parent cares about more than their kid. And they are literally 10 to 15%. 30% of the kids in my high school their family moved to Austin to go to the school.
That's
right? What products are out there that you move just so I can buy this product, right? It's parents will do, and so there's that. Governments spend 5% of their GNP on education, right?
Right.
We spend, back to how big the market is. Healthcare is the biggest market in the world. Education's second. It's, globally estimated like $7 trillion.
Yeah.
Right? So it's this enormous market because everybody understands the most important thing is to raise the kids.
Yes.
Right? And develop them and make them grow and flourish and shine. And so, so no one's ever thought this. So part of what my job is to come into the space, show you can build great businesses, and then go get all the other builders who haven't been here to come on in, right? And I think back to where we are, we're at a time where you're going to just see an explosion of educational innovation. If you go down to Austin,
it's so cool.
There's so many different schools down there, right? I can just roll out, right? If you're on Twitter, you can just see all these different great schools. You don't have to pick Alpha, right? There's plenty of great schools where it's all innovation, right? And all these entrepreneurs are building these new awesome things.
Yeah.
And I believe that's going to be, one of the things that you need for all that innovation for schools is you need parents who are open-minded. Austin's a great place because all the people who moved in during COVID, right, were entrepreneurial or people who were willing. They needed to find a new school, so they took the risk.
That's why I came to Florida too, for the exact same reason. If there's a place where you're going to build a new educational product, it has to be one of the places where the people are desperately looking for a school anyway. So at least they'll entertain the idea of something new to have their kids go.
And so anyway, so I believe this, and because of the if you build it, Alpha's showing, right? Alpha's the most talked about school in the world, right? And I mean, every country is everybody is calling us about this, right? And there's obviously skepticism. I agree until we have a randomized controlled trial with 1 million kids. If I was the Department of Education, I'd be like, how do we get 1 million kids in a randomized controlled trial and see if this works and every demographic and all these things, and how do we do that? The same way we do with pharmaceuticals.
Right.
We're like, hey, let's make sure this works before we roll it out everywhere. Now, in the meantime, there's a bunch of parents who are like, I've seen enough, and that's fine too, right? And that's, so we're growing that side. But, I understand on the public side, there's a higher standard and, government stuff and all that. And so start the studies, like figure it out, right? Figure out how to do that. And you're going to see stuff. We're opening some schools in some public school districts. And so there'll start to be, some of that data that'll get done. But really what we'll be showing and what we really hope to show, these can be great businesses.
Yeah.
We can go get the best talent, the best builders, people who historically haven't. You haven't said, how many new innovative startups, when you look at everything, all the Ivy League, all the elite schools, all normal schools, they're all the same as they were 20 years ago, 50 years ago, some cases 100 years ago.
Right.
Right. I mean, they literally haven't changed.
Right.
And there's a view, back to I believe it's changing, but parents still have a view of my kid should be educated the way I was.
Yeah.
And now that's fraying for the first time. Homeschooling's up, right? People are now starting to be upset with their schools, and for the first time ever, is college worth it, right? So there's all these market things that they're like, okay, this product's not doing what we want. And so it's a great opportunity for entrepreneurs to come in and build awesome products.
Yeah, it feels, honestly, and you tell me if your intuition maps to this, it feels like how defense technology felt maybe 10 or 20 years ago, right? And then you had companies like Palantir and Anduril come in, and they're doing great. Anduril, I think, just got like a $20 billion contract the other day. Like, wow, okay. But they had the guts to go into a market that everybody said was dead. Like, I think, back in 2012, I think Google employees even were like, oh, okay, we can't even work with the defense industry. Crazy stuff. I mean, that's a whole other national security issue. But I think, and tell me, if you agree with this, I think that this kind of education, making sure that we are actually preparing our kids at this level, will become a national security issue if it isn't already, at a massive level, especially with the way that the information systems are evolving. We need people who are able to build in this context. And, once that government blockade on education dollars, because this is part I think we've sort of alluded to, we haven't talked about this yet. Part of the reason why education is so difficult to invest in is that the bulk of the money that people have that would have been invested in education is in tax dollars, which is being directed straight to public schools, and it's not in your pocket, and you don't decide where it goes, and then it's just gone, and then your disposable income to spend on education for most people is very little. Once that gets freed up, it's a different story, and it looks like that's coming. And so when that does get freed up, well, now the world's a different place. Now we're starting to look a lot like the new defense industry, which I think people are clamoring to see if you can get a bit of Anduril right now.
And so to that point, I believe, things that I've learned since I've become principal and gotten in the market, the private school market. So there's public and private. Public school is a $900 billion market. Private's $100 billion. So let's just even put the $900 billion aside for now. $100 billion market of
big.
These legacy high-end private schools who haven't changed forever, who think things like, I don't teach the kids, you should hire an after-school tutor, is like a common thing. They're just, it's a weird framework that these guys all have. They're riding their legacy brand, or they're riding their legacy campus, right? Those are the two things that, dominate there. And the ability, though, to build businesses in a $100 billion market, it's plenty big.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I believe, and part of what Alpha's doing is it's showing, look at what is doable. Look at what is capable, right? And that create that, showcase, example for everybody of, look, this is what you could expect for your kids. And then I believe it will pull demand the rest of the way.
Right.
And when you talk about and then now moving over to the $900 billion, so just even in that, plenty of market. So to all the entrepreneurs out there, plenty of market just in the private school space, like plenty of space.
It's huge.
Right? $100 billion, how big's your company? Plenty of billion-dollar companies can be built in there. Then you go over to the public school segment. You are getting vouchers where, those tax dollars now are starting to be created where states and the federal government are saying, parents, you decide how the money's spent. And so now it's a fraction to give you, on scale, but it's a fraction of this industry is still a lot. So to give you an example, in Texas spends about $100 billion a year on education. So, just on scale, right? Texas, a lot. $100 billion market. They just did $1 billion voucher program. So 1%. There's massive outrage about it and it's a lot of politics, but it's literally 1%. But that $1 billion for entrepreneurs is
massive.
Plenty. It's plenty to get new innovative schools, right, that can deliver and so we can get the educational innovation that we need. And I believe that, and the federal government's about to, next year, they have a nationwide voucher program that will be bigger than the sum of all the states. Florida has one, Florida and Arizona, there's a set of states who have these ESAs, state vouchers. The federal government's going to come in over the top. It's going to be even bigger. So there's going to be plenty of market for the first time in a long time for entrepreneurs to come to build these transformative products, right, that transform kids' lives. And I believe the parents will be given the funding to go buy those.
And that changes everything.
Changes everything.
Yeah, because then that's the validation. That's the actual cell changing there. That's the thing that everyone's assuming when they say it's uninvestable because all the capital was locked up. And we start seeing that capital getting unlocked. Yeah. Game over.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. And that's beautiful. So it's I'm going to be spending the next 20 years on this, right? And I couldn't be more bullish. It's been a great 4 years, but I'm looking forward, right, to the next 20, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, and can I be honest? And I'll say this, at least on behalf of people my own age doing this stuff. I'm in my early 30s. The water's warm. Let's jump right in. Exactly. I can't think of a better place to build, and I'm so grateful that there's people like you out here blazing the way, right? It makes it possible for all the rest of us, and thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for this, and thanks for the time with, you and your audience of just talking about, I do believe, educating parents, right, on all, just on what is possible is the biggest. When people say, what's the biggest impediment? I'm like, well, parents don't believe any of this stuff's possible. And educating them and showing them and demonstrating them and all the things with, all of your programs where you're like, look at what these kids can do.
It's way more than you ever thought.
Way more than you ever thought.
So beautiful. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.